Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. I'm not sure when the unease first crept in that night, but by the time I rolled down the gravel driveway toward the Hart farm, it felt like every shadow was alive. My cruiser's overhead LEDs cut through the October fog in sickly beams, revealing only more swirling mist and the skeletal frames of bare branched trees. The air was colder than I'd expected, sharp enough to sting my lungs, and carried a faint undercurrent of sweetness, like rotting apples left too long under a decaying orchard. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence pressed against my ears until I could hear my own ragged breath. Midnight welfare check, I mouthed to myself, as if saying it aloud could anchor me to reason. A welfare check was about the simplest call you could get. Neighbors worried about an elderly resident, no sign of foul play. But the Hart place was so isolated, with reports of 8 cats and who knew how many kittens running loose, that I already felt off balance. My partner, Sarah Jenkins, was next to me, leaning across to peer into the darkness. Her reflection in the windshield looked pale and tense. We stepped out in unison, boots crunching on loose stone. A boarded-up shed sat half-collapsed off to our left, and the faint flicker of a single porch light hung by a frayed wire, swaying every time the wind shifted. The front yard was strewn with overturned flower pots, leaves, and broken ceramic shards. I gripped my flashlight tighter, the metal cylinder cool against my palm. The beam danced across peeling paint on the farmhouse's siding, faded white, peeling like dead skin. A single front window was shattered, glass shards glinting at odd angles. Sarah clicked off her mic before it chirped. "You ready?" she asked, voice low. I nodded, swallowing back bile I didn't want leaking into my throat. "Let's check the back," I said, and we edged around to the side door. Each step seemed to echo, though there was nothing else to carry sound, no crickets, no breeze. Even the cats were silent. When I pressed my ear against the door, I heard it then, an almost imperceptible skittering, like claws scraping thin wood. My heart kicked up. I crouched and shone my light through the crack at floor level. 4 glowing eyes stared back, set in tufts of matted fur. The largest cat regarded me with uncanny patience. I forced my voice steady. "Peterson Fire Rescue, we need breathing gear ASAP." The words sounded hollow. I backed away slowly, radioing dispatch with clipped clarity. Static hissed back. "Copy that. ETA 6 minutes." Those 6 minutes stretched out to an eternity. Sarah stood beside me, arms crossed, jaw clenched. We watched the broken door, waiting for the call that would let us breach. The longer we waited, the more that single cat on the windowsill seemed like the sentinel of some hidden ritual. Finally, headlights swept through the fog, twin beams bobbing as Rescue 12 rolled up. 2 firefighters disembarked, donning masks and cylinders with practiced efficiency. I stepped aside, lifting my flashlight to guide them. The smell hit me full force then, sour, rank, like meat left on the bone too long. I had smelled decay before, remains of deer struck on a highway, or the aftermath of a barn fire. But this was different. Intimate, personal, like the air itself had been poisoned by whatever lay inside. Through their masks, I could see the firefighters exchange nods. One kicked the door gently, and it swung inward with a groan that made me flinch. They entered in single file, lights in hand. Behind them, I felt Sarah's presence and the weight of expectation. This was still our scene until we cleared it. But I couldn't look away from that open doorway. After a moment, the lead firefighter emerged, face pale behind the plastic shield. I asked, quietly, "Is she alive?" He shook his head and pointed at the back room window where late-night traffic would never pass. I trained my beam through the glass. There she lay. Evelyn Hart, limbs splayed unnatural, draped across a sofa half hidden beneath piles of newspapers. I remembered the clippings. Stories about her husband's tractor accident, the single line noting his death 8 years prior. It felt wrong to see her here, alone, like a forgotten chapter. The cats had surrounded her. Most hunched back as we approached, but 2 smaller ones stayed near her torso, teeth bared as if guarding. I swallowed and cleared my throat. "Move them," I said softly. The firefighters looked at each other, and one raised his gloved hand, herding the felines away with gentle taps of his flashlight. The cats darted off into shadows, tiny silhouettes slipping under the porch. I stepped inside, boots muffled on the sagging floorboards. The papers smelled of old ink and mold. I knelt beside her head, lifting her eyelids out of habit. No vitals, of course. I checked pockets for ID, found her badge from a local quilting guild, a folded letter from her granddaughter. Each small item told me how long she'd been here alone. I stood, brushing a stray hair from my uniform, and radioed in. "One deceased, no signs of foul play, request coroner." Back outside, I watched fire rescue bag her body. Sarah jotted notes on her pad. I closed my eyes, wanting to scrub the image from my mind, but there it remained, an old woman's final rest interrupted by hungry cats and a chase for survival. I felt a hollow space open inside me, and I realized the grocery list for tomorrow, the domestic chores waiting at home, all seemed trivial in comparison. When they loaded her onto the stretcher, those mangy cats slunk back into view, gathering at the threshold like mourners. One black cat paused, yellow eyes reflecting the cruiser's lights, then melted into the night. I watched until it vanished. Sarah nudged me. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded, though my legs felt unsteady. "Let's finish the report." We trudged back to the cruiser in silence, headlights cutting a corridor through the fog. In the passenger seat, Sarah opened her notebook. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the engine's hum calm my racing heart. I don't know how long I sat there, breathing in that stale mixture of fear and resignation. Eventually, Sarah cleared her throat. "You hearing that?" I tensed, thought I heard a faint meow. She pointed down the driveway, where 2 kittens peered from behind a fence post, eyes wide and curious. They inched forward, tails twitching. I opened the door slowly. One kitten hopped onto the running board. It stared at me, and I swear I could see recognition in its gaze. I knelt, extending a hand. The kitten sniffed, then rubbed against my boot. My chest tightened. I thought of Evelyn Hart. Did she care for these kittens before she faded away? Were they destined to suffer the same slow hunger she did? My radio crackled. "Unit 22, you can clear. Animal control is en route." I exhaled, reaching down to scratch behind the kitten's ear. It purred, a tiny rasp that felt like hope. As I climbed back into the cruiser, the mist thickened, swallowing the red and blue glow of our lights. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The kitten remained on the pavement, silhouette small against the endless fog. I tapped the mic. "Let's head back." Sarah drove us away, and I watched the kitten fade until only its eyes gleamed for a moment more, before disappearing into nothing. We pulled back into the station yard just before 2 a.m. The neon "Police" sign above the dispatch window flickered weakly, casting half the parking lot in murky blue light. I shut off the cruiser, listening to the engine's last clicks as it coiled down. Sarah unbuckled and stretched, her spine cracking in a way that made me wince for her. Inside, dispatch was quiet. Only one dispatcher at the board, typing up a traffic collision report. She glanced up as we entered, offering a silent nod that said she'd read the heart call on her screen. We walked past rows of lockers and the briefing room, the faint scent of stale coffee and paperwork hanging in the air. "Let's get this report finished so we can grab some coffee before the next shift shows up," Sarah murmured, flicking on the fluorescent lights. They buzzed to life overhead, harsh and unforgiving. I exhaled and walked to my desk, flipping through the loose pages waiting for my statement. Every sheet felt heavy in my hands. I sank into the swivel chair, pulling my notebook and pen forward. As I wrote the narrative, time of arrival, atmospheric conditions, the call for fire rescue, the removal of the cats, I realized how sterile it all sounded on paper. The victim was deceased on arrival. The words blurred as I scrawled the standard jargon. I closed my eyes to blink away the memory of her face. In the pure white light of the station, I could almost see her again. A frail hand outstretched, newspaper pages stuck to the floor like petals. I heard Sarah clear her throat. "You okay?" she asked, looking over at me. Her hands were on her hips, and I could see shadowed concern in her eyes. "Yeah." I folded the last page, stamped it, and slid it across. "Just feels weird. Filling out the same form I always do, and yet it's never about something like that." She gave me a half smile. Hart was an elder with pets. Calls like that usually end with nothing more than a missing person found safe. This one was different. I leaned back, adjusting my cap, and watched the fluorescent tube hum overhead. "You think the kitten helped us cope?" I asked quietly. That little guy made me feel like something living could still matter. Sarah shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe it just reminded you of why we do this." She tapped the signed report. "Let's grab coffee. You need it more than I do." We washed up in the locker room, scrubbing off the smell with hospital-grade soap, and emerged into the lobby, where a battered old Keurig sat by the vending machine. We loaded pods, black for her, sugar and cream for me, and retreated to the small break room furnished with a stained sofa and a wall-mounted TV stuck on muted crime drama reruns. I sipped slowly, the bitter warmth settling into my chest. Outside the window, the station yard was silent, but for the blinking surveillance light. I swallowed. "We both know this isn't over," I said, almost to myself. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "I can't stop thinking about those cats, how hungry they must have been, and how one was big enough to protect the others." I glanced sideways at her, and that black kitten at the driveway, it looked at me like it knew me. Her jaw tightened. "You think it followed you home?" I shrugged. "I don't know, but I swear I heard something at my back door when I got home. 3 soft taps, like paws." I traced the rim of my mug with a fingertip. "My wife said doors were locked. No pets in the house except our dog, Max." Sarah's shoulders slumped. "You're going to see cats in every shadow. You need sleep." I offered a thin smile. "I'll try." We drained our cups and returned our mugs. By the time I punched out, the station clock read 2:45 a.m. I climbed back into my cruiser for the final leg home. The radio crackled with a roll call for the day shift, but I tuned it out, focusing instead on the world ahead. That night, in the thin hours before dawn, I tossed and turned. Under my eyelids, I saw Evelyn's face, the cat's, the fog-shrouded drive. Max curled against my leg, his heartbeat steady and warm, but it was the chronic ache in my skull that woke me at least 6 times. At 5:17 a.m., I bolted upright and heard it, the faintest meow. I froze. My blood seemed to drain from my face. I told myself it was Max's whine, or the wind rattling an eave. But the meow came again, soft, persistent, almost melodic. I slipped out of bed in the dark, bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. Moving toward the back door, I flicked on a dim hallway light. No cats, only the empty night split by my flashlight beam. I opened the door, and there, on the welcome mat, sat that black kitten. It blinked at me, whiskers twitching. My heart thundered as though ready to leap out of my chest. I stared, the kitten stared, and for a moment I believed there was a purpose to its presence, a messenger from the afterlife, or a guardian spirit. I crouched low. It hopped forward and nuzzled my hand. I felt an odd relief, yet beneath it pulsed a chill, like icy water in my veins. Unable to leave it there, I scooped the kitten up and cradled it in my jacket. It purred low, resonant and knowing. I carried it inside, set it in a laundry basket with towels. Max growled from the other room. First time I thought I'd hear any reaction from my dog in weeks. I shut the door between rooms and collapsed back into bed, the kitten warm against my side. In the morning, I woke with my uniform laid out, the kitten gone. I searched the house, no sign of it. Only the basket with flattened towels. My wife said likely a stray got inside when I left the door open. I nodded and moved on. But something had shifted. During roll call, my eyes felt raw, my concentration fractured. The sergeant barked out assignments, and I barely caught that my next call was a disturbance at a lonely farmhouse, only 40 minutes from the station. I drove out, the kitten's absence a hollow ache. The sign on the dirt road read, Dawson Ranch, authorized vehicles only. I clicked my mic. Unit 22 en route. The sun was climbing, but clouds shrouded it in gray. A lone oak stood at the driveway fork, its branches reaching like arthritic fingers. When I arrived, the house looked tidy. Fresh paint, potted geraniums by the porch. A young woman in yoga pants paced, phone pressed to her ear. "Thank God you're here," she breathed, eyes rimmed red. "My husband, he disappeared." I stepped out, noting the woman's trembling hands. "I'm Officer Reed," I said, extending a hand. "Tell me what happened." Her voice wavered. "He went out to do chores, feed the goats, check the fences. It's been 2 hours, and the gates were left open. The goats are wandering the pasture, but no sign of him." I consulted my notebook. Husband, mid-30s, no known mental health issues. Weather calm, slight breeze, no known enemies. Standard missing person. But inside, alarm bells clanged. I straightened, masking the tension. "Let's take a look around." Together, we walked into the barnyard. Goats bleated, small hooves clacking on wood. The barn door hung ajar. Inside, scattered feed sacks, tools fallen. I crouched, shining my beam into darkness. A smear of muddy footprints led out a back door. Beyond, the field stretched into a copse of pine. I followed, heart racing. The undergrowth ruffled, and I heard something at the tree line. A soft, staccato meow. My pulse spiked. I drew my weapon out of a habit, then holstered it with an exasperated sigh. "Cat?" I muttered. The sound came again, nearer. I backpedaled until the woman caught up. "That mewling, it's my grandmother's cat," she said, eyes wide. "She passed last month. I buried Whiskers in the backyard." A shiver crawled up my spine. "You buried him?" I asked, voice low. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Suddenly, a breeze swept through the pines, and I thought I saw movement. Shadow shifting between trunks. I raised my flashlight. Nothing. Then again, a flicker, like a shape darted from behind a stump too tall for a cat. My breath hitched. I spun, ready to call out backup, and froze. At the edge of the clearing stood a figure. Tall, hunched, dark coat brushing the grass. No face visible, only 2 pinprick lights where eyes should have been. A low, resonant mew emanated from it, a sound no cat that size could make. I swallowed, voice gone. The clearing pulsed with silence, goats bleating behind us. The woman gasped, stepping back. The figure cocked its head, emitting that impossible meow again. My radio stuttered to life. "Unit 22, you there?" I snapped out of it, bolstered by duty. "I'm here," I said, voice shaking but clear. "We have a possible missing person and something else." Sarah's voice crackled through. "Sending you backup. ETA 5 minutes. The figure took a step forward. My chest tightened like steel bands. The goat's bleats turned frantic. The woman screamed, and I drew my weapon, knees trembling. Before I could react, the shape melted back into the trees, vanishing without sound. I stared at where it had been, mind racing. No normal explanation fit. The cat cries faded on the wind. I turned to the woman, whose face was drained of color. "Ma'am, you need to stay here," I said, tone firm. "I'm going out there." She shook her head. "Please don't. I can't leave a man missing," I said. "Call 911 if you need help." I stepped alone into the gloom of pines, Sarah's cruiser light sweeping the clearing with red and blue hues. Every footstep seemed to echo. I scanned the underbrush but found nothing. Only footprints of boots, not paws. Yet I could still hear that impossible meow echoing through the trunks. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Officer Reed, hold it together." And somewhere beyond sight the meowing paused and resumed, closer this time. I stepped deeper into the stand of pines, every breath tightening in my chest as if the air itself resisted my presence. My flashlight beam carved a narrow tunnel through the gloom, particles of mist drifting like motes caught in a spotlight. The mewing stopped the instant I crossed beneath the lowest bough, and I eased to a halt, listening. Only the soft scuff of my boots on pine needle carpet, and the distant bleats of goats drifting back across the clearing. The hairs on my forearms prickled. I considered turning back, but duty propelled me forward. My radio lay silent in my hand. I hadn't summoned Sarah's backup yet. One false move, and I could be out here alone, chasing a shadow that didn't belong. Then I heard it again, a single, mournful mew coming from just beyond a ragged clump of underbrush. I raised my beam. The brush parted slightly, revealing a narrow gap in the trees. I could just make out a sloping dirt trail that wound uphill. Fresh footprints, half submerged in a thin crust of dew, led toward the summit. I knelt, shining the beam along the prints. Scuffed boots, similar to mine. No sign of paws, yet the echo of that mew lingered, an impossible reminder that something was watching. My pulse hammered. I radioed Sarah. "Backup called. You'll hit the driveway any second." "Copy," she replied, urgency in her tone. "I'm on the road." I rose and followed the tracks, stepping carefully around exposed roots. The trees grew denser, branches interlocking overhead, swallowing the sky. My light flickered with each gust of cold wind. Somewhere above, a loose branch scraped across another, producing a low groan that sounded almost human. I swallowed hard, each breath loud in my ears. Suddenly, the prints ended at a thicket. I pressed the beam through the leaves. Behind them, lay a shallow depression trampled into the earth. Clear signs someone had knelt or fallen here. The ground was damp with melted frost, and I saw a smear of dark red where soil mixed with blood. My stomach clenched. "Dispatch," I whispered into my radio. "I need a medical examiner on scene. Possible blood." "Roger," came the calm reply. "Me en route." I crouched, examining the smear. It trailed in tiny streaks uphill. My flashlight caught on something else. A tuft of fabric snagged on a thorny branch. I knelt, pried it free. A scrap of denim, frayed and damp. It matched the missing husband's jeans described in the dispatch. My mind flashed back to the woman's face, pale and terrified. I bolted upright, heart racing. A rustle echoed just above me. I swung the beam upward, but saw only blackness. The mew returned, louder this time, curling around me like a living thing. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer, only the persistent mew. I followed the trail again, knees aching, flashlight bouncing on the battered path. The incline grew steeper. Branches scratched at my shoulders. The forest floor gave way to rocks slick with moisture. I stepped up onto a small ledge, and the world dropped away behind me. My breath caught. I stood on the edge of an abandoned logging road, long since reclaimed by nature. A rusted sign, half buried in moss, read, "Old Dawson Logging Company. Do not enter." Yet beyond, the trees parted to reveal an ancient clearing, ringed by gnarled trunks. At its center stood the silhouette of a stone well, crumbling mortar and a rusted bucket hanging from a sagging beam. The bucket swayed gently, though no breeze stirred. The mew came again, this time from deep within the well, where darkness pooled. I approached, beam trained on the opening. The bucket stopped swinging. Silence. Then one single, drawn-out mew, echoing from the depths like a plea. I leaned forward. The abyss stared back. A void so black I couldn't see bottom. A wet scrape rang out as something moved on the damp stones inside. My stomach soured. I fought the urge to step back, to abandon this foolish pursuit. Instead, I pulled out my handcuffs attached to my belt and snapped one cuff open. Tentatively, I lowered it into the well on its chain, listening as it clinked against stone. Another mew, muffled, closer. My heart hammered. Then something lunged upward. A shape, slender and curved, leapt from the well's mouth. I lurched backward, nearly losing my footing. The object that flew past me wasn't cat-sized. It was larger, lanky, more like the outline of a person hunkered low. A flash of eyes reflected my light, pupils contracted, unblinking. Pupils so round they seemed almost unreal before the thing dropped beyond my vision. I tumbled to the ground, flashlight clattering away. My heart thundered in my ears as I scrambled for the beam. When I clicked it back on, the clearing was empty. The bucket hung still. No shape, no sound, only the dull drip-drip of water deep below. Instinct screamed at me to flee. Instead, I moved to the well's edge, peered down, and felt bile rise. The shaft was deeper than I expected, walls slimy with algae. At the bottom, dim reflections caught my light, something pale and twisted. I cupped my hand over the beam to narrow the beam. Jagged outline of jeans, a boot sole, a hand splayed on mud, and beside it, crawling upward, a mass of writhing bodies. Kittens, dozens of them, fur matted, eyes glassy. Their mews echoed off the stone in a terrible chorus. My blood ran cold. I staggered back. The kittens chased their prey. Nothing humane about their motion, more like gnashing teeth on bone, yet somehow not feeding. They seemed compelled. Then, as if sensing my gaze, they paused and looked up. Their mews stopped, and the clearing filled with silence so profound it felt like drowning. At that moment, my radio crackled. "Unit 22, status." I fumbled to answer. There's something down here. I need help, now." My voice pitched higher than I wanted. "Hold tight, Reed. Backup is almost there." I backed away from the well, heart pounding. The kittens scuttled upward, oozing from the shaft like shadows on legs. In the dim light, they coalesced into a single shape, taller than any cat, hunched and misshapen, eyes gleaming like twin lanterns. My breath froze. I fumbled for my service weapon, but my fingers rattled on its cold grip. The figure took a step forward, joints clicking, spines arching, a grotesque amalgam of feline grace and human crooked limbs. It tilted its head and opened a jagged mouth with teeth too many and too sharp. A mew issued, not small, but guttural, resonant, more human than cat. My radio buzzed, Sarah's voice urgent. "Hang on, Reed. We're prying the others out of the woods. Be there in 2 minutes." I swallowed, jaw tight. "Copy that." I backed up further, tripping over a root and falling. The figure advanced. I aimed my flashlight at it, but the beam washed over it like water, leaving only darkness. My breath came in ragged gasps. I thought of Evelyn, her limp body draped on the couch, of the black kitten that followed me home. I thought of the missing husband, likely at the well's bottom. I thought of Sarah racing to save me. The creature paused at the clearing's edge and cocked its head. It emitted a single mournful sound, half meow, half wail, that resonated through my bones. Then it turned and stalked back into the pines, kittens trailing behind like a living carpet. I didn't hesitate. I jumped to my feet and ran, stumbling down the logging road, branches tearing at my jacket. Behind me, the echo of claws on stone, the soft mews trailing off. My lungs burned. I reached the tree line and burst back into the goat pasture, where Sarah's cruiser sat with lights ablaze. Sarah and 2 officers poured out, rifles drawn. "Reed, are you okay?" she called, rushing to me. I pointed back into the woods, voice shaking. "It's in there. Something comes up from that well. God help me, something not right." She peered toward the tree line. "Let's get you out of here." I nodded numbly, backing away. Behind me, the pines stood still. I felt damp eyes on my back, but when I looked, nothing moved, only endless trunks and shadows. We piled into the cruiser. Before Sarah could pull away, I gasped. "The husband. He's down there. Alive, maybe?" She grabbed the mic. "Dispatch, we need EMS and a team on scene ASAP. Subject missing, possible injured." The engine roared. We peeled out of the driveway, leaving the clearing behind. As we reached the station, I looked back once. Only the trees and an empty logging road. I sank into the seat, trembling. Sarah glanced at me. "You did good," she said softly. I closed my eyes, hands still shaking. I saw him and those kittens. She squeezed my shoulder. "Get some rest. We'll sort it out in the morning." But I knew rest wouldn't come, because somewhere in those woods something inhuman prowled, born of grief, fueled by hunger, obeying rules no natural creature could follow. And I realized, with a sinking dread, that I was not sure which was more terrifying, that it existed, or that I might not be the only one to hear its lonely cry at midnight. I woke the next afternoon to the shriek of my alarm at 5:45 a.m., head pounding so hard I thought my skull might split. The memory of last night's horror lurked at the edge of my senses. The well full of kittens, the grotesque composite figure, the missing husband somewhere in those dark woods. Coffee did little to clear the fog in my mind, but duty called. At 7 a.m. we had an all-hands briefing, and I was running late. I pulled on a fresh uniform, my badge catching the early morning light, and forced myself to breathe deeply. Max padded into the kitchen, nose twitching, but I barely noticed. I grabbed Sarah's travel mug, black coffee, no sugar, and ran out the door, switching the cruiser on without a thought. As I backed out of the driveway, it struck me that the world beyond might already know something terrible was stirring on that logging road. Back at the station, the ship's sergeant, Captain Morales, was already in the briefing room, arms folded over his chest, jaw set. He glanced up as I slid into an empty chair and tapped a printed map laid flat on the table. "Morning, Reed," he said, tone clipped. "You look like hell. I don't know what happened last night, but we're grateful you made it back. We've got fire rescue, EMS, animal control, the works, everyone's staged at Dawson Ranch. We'll move as soon as we have all hands. Sarah's team is en route with me, you, 2 K9 units, and 3 patrol cars." I rubbed my temples. "Sir, what's the plan for the husband?" He pointed to the map. "House here, logging road up here, well in the clearing. Preliminary search party found a band of footprints leading downhill to the well and back. But last night's incident, whatever you saw, has everyone spooked. I want you on point for locating Mr. Dawson. I'm assigning Detective Harris to evidence collection." Detective Harris, a salt and pepper man with hawk eyes, nodded without surprise. "Good to see you alive, Reed." He tapped his holster. "I've been reviewing your report. You're sure that wasn't a hallucination?" I swallowed hard. "Positive. I wouldn't joke about something like that, Harris." He gave me a measured look but said nothing. Morales continued. "We enter in 3 teams. Team Alpha, led by you and Sarah, will breach the well site first. Bravo and Charlie flank the clearing to secure perimeter and catch anything that runs. K9s will sweep downhill toward the house. We break the well's cover, lower a rope, extract Mr. Dawson if he's alive. Agreed." Heads bobbed around the table. I closed my eyes for a moment, envisioning that circular stone opening, kittens hissing, the uncanny shape. "Agreed," I said. By 8:30 a.m., we rolled out in 3 blacked-out SUVs. My cruiser was Alpha Team's lead vehicle. Sarah drove. I sat shotgun, rifle across my knees. The air was chillier than expected, low clouds scudding overhead. I kept my eyes on the tree line, scanning for movement. Detective Harris and 2 deputies trailed behind in Bravo, while Charlie followed with K9 and animal control. We arrived at the turnoff well before sunrise. The goats were gone, of course. They'd been herded back by ranch hands. The farmhouse looked abandoned, like a trap waiting to spring. I killed the engine and felt the familiar wash of dread crash over me. I grabbed my rifle, checked the charge, and stepped out into the muddy driveway. My boots sank an inch into soaked gravel. "Alpha Team on me," I called softly. In formation, we marched uphill, light from torches cutting a path. The logging road entrance was marked by the rusty "No Trespassing" sign. I paused. "Stay sharp. Last night we saw something that could be dangerous. Move slow." We spread out in a loose wedge. Sarah radioed Bravo to form a line behind us. The tension was thick. Breaths came in visible puffs. Rifles bounced against chests. Every crackle in the underbrush sounded like an ambush. Reaching the clearing, I signal flashed a brief pattern. Brave beams illuminated the well. We fanned out, rifles raised. The well's stone rim was cracked in places, damp and covered in green moss. The bucket lay on its side, chain coiled on the ground. There were kittens, dozens of them, scuttling back into the trees, their tiny bodies slipping into shadow. When I clicked the beam onto them, they froze, eyes glinting, then erupted into a riot of movement, racing through our legs without fear. "Contact the pets," I barked. Separate them from the well." Animal control stepped forward with nets and carriers, as Harris and I rolled back the heavy circular wooden cover. The air that rose was colder than outside, touched with damp fear. I leaned in, shining my light down. At the bottom, I saw it, a narrow shaft opening into darkness, slick stones spiraling down. No immediate sign of Mr. Dawson, but the crystals of moisture on the wall glinted like distant stars. One deputy propped a ladder. Harris descended first, lamp in hand, scanning each foothold, calling out as he went. A tense minute passed. We watched the swinging beam until Harris's voice drifted up. "I see something. Man's boot." I knelt, reaching to pass a rope down. "Attached to his belt or ankle," I said. "If he's alive, we haul him up. If not, prepare stretchers." A muffled grunt answered. Harris's lamp grazed a figure on one knee, head bowed. He tightened the rope around a leg, then rushed up, hauling it taut. I grabbed the slack and began heaving. The well seemed bottomless. The rope slid slowly, creaking. Suddenly, a chorus of mews erupted from within the shaft, low and layered, like a choir of broken voices. The rope jerked violently, and I yanked it back hard. My heart leapt into my throat. "Hold it!" I shouted. The kitten's cries grew frantic, echoing off wet stone. Up came the rope faster, and at the rim I saw both boots, then legs, then torso. Mr. Dawson emerged, drenched head to toe, hair matted, eyes wide and unseeing. He slumped over the edge, coughing water and dirt. I grabbed him as he wavered, nearly collapsing back into the shaft, and hauled him the rest of the way. He lay on the ground, sodden and shivering. Paramedics knelt beside him, pressing a space blanket around his shoulders, checking pulse and breathing. His pupils fluttered behind closed lids. I exhaled, relief tearing through me, then stilled as I noticed his face, gone slack in a way that spoke more of terror than of injury. His lips twitched, and a slow whimper escaped him. One paramedic asked, "Pulse is weak but steady. Transport him out." I nodded, but my attention was on the well. The kittens had vanished, and in their place, shadows clung to the stones. I swallowed. "What did you see, Dawson?" I asked softly, kneeling. He opened his eyes, and for a moment, they seemed to gleam with something not quite human, an echo of last night's figure. He breathed raggedly, then whispered, "It feeds." I exchanged a glance with Harris. He frowned. "Feeds? On what?" Dawson's head lolled back. "On fear and the souls." His words trailed off into a shuddering breath. Paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher, and we backed away, letting them wheel him down the road. Sarah touched my arm. "You okay?" I closed my eyes, hearing Dawson's voice echo in my mind. "I don't know. We staged a perimeter sweep to ensure no other strange creatures lurked. The K9 units caught nothing beyond normal wildlife. Animal control found no kittens near the well, no scratches on the walls. It was as if the entire clearing had swallowed every trace. By noon, the site was cleared for investigators to document. Harris collected a single scrap of denim, the same we'd found last night, before it dissolved in a light mist as he touched it. We left the well ringed by crime scene tape, a silent sentinel to horrors we barely comprehended. Back at the station, I sat alone in the locker room, wrestling with my report. Morales dropped by, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "You did your job," he said quietly, "but maybe you need time off." I shook my head. "Not yet. Not while this thing is out there." He nodded slowly, respect mingling with concern. "Tomorrow, you take the day, find some peace, or you'll collapse." I didn't argue. I sat in the quiet, fluorescent hum ringing in my ears, and wondered how many times I'd hear that mew in my dreams. The protective shell of duty felt brittle now, cracking under the pressure of what I'd seen. As I left, the station clock read 3:15 p.m. Sunlight flickered across the driveway, but I saw only the darkness beneath the trees. I climbed into my cruiser for the ride home, hands tight on the wheel, mind already racing ahead to the final test, catching whatever lurked in the midnight hours before it could slip away again. The SUV's headlights cut a corridor through the woods as I drove home, radio silent except for the hum of the engine. My phone buzzed twice with texts from Captain Morales. Report by 8 a.m. tomorrow. Get rest. I thumbed out a curt reply. On it. Though I knew sleep wouldn't come easy. Dawn was hours away, but fatigue had already set in, heavy and bone deep. At the house, the front porch light glowed welcome in the pre-dawn gloom. Max bounded out from his doghouse and circled the cruiser, tail wagging like a metronome. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, both hands on the wheel, staring into the dark windshield. The memory of last night's rescue, Dawson's hollow eyes, Dawson whispering that it feeds on fear and souls, pressed at my skull. My uniform smelled faintly of pine sap and damp earth, a scent I couldn't wash away. Inside, the living room was silent. A single lamp threw a pool of light over my wife's knitting basket. I set my keys on the console table and rubbed my face, trying to scrub away the day's horrors. Max brushed against my leg, but I barely noticed, too lost in thought to kneel and stroke his fur. I filled the kettle and set it to boil, then trudged to the bedroom to hang up my jacket. The knot in my gut tightened. What if it came looking for me here? I shook my head, ridiculous. It had to be a freak combination of trauma and stress. Rational. Breathe. The kettle hissed. I poured water into a mug, added instant coffee, and carried it back to the couch. Swiveling to face the TV, I sat heavy, Max at my feet, and flipped on a muted crime show. The anchors talked about a missing college student, standard fare. But my mind wandered. Every time the camera panned to a cat or a furnace vent, I flinched as if seeing it move. My phone chimed again. Alpha team debrief at 8:30. Be there or... I slammed it closed. No need for threats. I downed half the coffee in one go, but it landed cold in my gut. I glanced at the clock. 3:47 a.m. Too early for anything. Sleep remained elusive. I sprawled on the couch, eyes burning. Max flopped beside me and let out a soft whine. I reached down and patted his head. Sorry, buddy. Tough night, I murmured. Minutes passed. The TV flickered. Somewhere along the line I drifted. Visions of kittens tumbling, claws shimmering, the grotesque figure climbing from the well. Then a sound, a low, drawn-out mew from somewhere behind me. My heart jumped. I spun. The room was dark, only pool of lamplight near the couch. Max? I whispered. The dog lifted his head, ears perked. The mew came again, soft, mournful, impossible. I kicked to my feet. My coffee mug rattled on the table. Who's there? My voice cracked. The second mew sounded closer, behind the sofa. My feet moved on their own, carrying me past the TV and toward the bookshelf. I steeled myself and rounded the corner. Empty. The knitted throw draped over an armchair rustled slightly, as though a weight had pressed against it. My pulse thundered. Then a tiny black shape slipped from beneath the chair. A kitten, jet black fur, eyes too bright in the low light, emerged and padded toward me. My breath hitched. This was impossible. The only cats on the property were outdoor strays, and animal control had rounded them up days ago. I froze. The kitten stopped feet away, mewled once, bleary but insistent. I knelt slowly, hands unclenched. It tilted its head and rubbed against my boot. its spine arched in a perfect cat silhouette. I reached out, trembling, and stroked its head. Its eyes pulsed with reflection, like twin lanterns in a dark hallway. "Where did you come from?" I whispered. The kitten mewed again, low and longing. My rational mind screamed that I was hallucinating, but my senses screamed louder that this was real. I scooped the kitten up, cradling it. It purred, a hollow, echoing sound that vibrated like a chill. I carried it to the kitchen, set it in an empty laundry basket, and checked the front door. Locked. All windows secure, no way in. I sank back onto the couch, kitten in my lap. Max nosed it, sniffed, and whimpered. The kitten raised its head to Max, mewled softly, and Max whimpered again, stepping away as though startled. The contrast between fur and paws, between a friendly dog and this impossible intruder, twisted my stomach. The clock ticked on. I held it for what felt like hours before the sound of boots on gravel outside jolted me. I bolted upright. The kitten froze. I rushed to the window and part the curtain. A patrol cruiser idled by my driveway, lights off. Sarah was at the wheel. I swallowed. Of all people I wanted to see, it was her. I flicked the porch light on. Moments later, a knock on the door. I set the basket down, took a deep breath, and opened it. "Read," Sarah said. Her face was pale in the porch glow. "Captain sent me to check on you." She stepped in, closing the door. "Coffee?" I raised the mug. "Thanks." My hands trembled. Sarah's gaze flicked to the basket. "What's that?" she asked, voice low. I glanced down. The kitten lay curled in my coat sleeve, eyes half closed, purring like a foghorn. "Found it. Inside." Sarah's breath caught. "Inside?" Her tone was equal parts confusion and dread. She stepped closer. "Why didn't you call me?" I shrugged. Didn't want to sound crazy. Her eyes narrowed. "Crazy is relative." She knelt and reached out. The kitten hissed. A sharp sound, claws extending. Sarah recoiled, startled. "It's hostile." I crossed my arms. Max didn't like it either. The kitten spat and scrambled from the basket to the floor, then padded toward the front door. It mewed at the frame, as if seeking release. I watched, heart pounding, until it turned and looked at me. Its gaze cut through my chest like a blade. Then it leapt up, vanished through the closed door. I heard it brush past the wood like air. Sarah and I stared at the door. No scratches on the paint, no trace of the kitten, just the quiet hum of the house and distant sirens marking early morning traffic. I exhaled, unsteady. "It got out," I muttered. Sarah rose, brushing off her knees. "Read, what the hell is happening?" I opened my mouth, words refusing to form. The rational part of me screamed that none of this was possible. The world made sense. Laws, protocols, procedures, none of which covered kittens emerging from locked houses or composite creatures in wells. The pre-dawn sky began to lighten at the window. Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me. "We need to report this," she said, "before whatever it is spreads." I swallowed, raising a hand. "I'll come with you." My voice sounded hoarse, unfamiliar. She nodded. "Good." We stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, tinged with dew and uncertainty. The cruiser's headlights snapped on as we climbed inside. I glanced back at the darkened house. The windows stared back, empty and judging. On the seat next to me lay my coffee mug, cold and half full. In its bottom, floating in stale grounds, I spotted a single black cat hair, long, fine, and glinting like an omen. I swallowed hard. "Sarah, look." She leaned over, squinted. "Where?" Then her eyes widened. "Damn," she breathed. "We've got bigger problems than just Mr. Dawson." I didn't respond. The engine growled as we pulled away. Ahead lay the station, bright, familiar, supposedly safe. Behind us lay the clearing, the well, the cat creature that fed on fear, but all around lurked shadows we could no longer ignore. As dawn broke over Meridian, a single question gnawed at me. When the darkness finds a way inside your home, how do you lock the door against the nightmares? I remember the instant I felt it, that icy prickle crawling up my spine like a warning siren. My cruiser's engine hummed softly in the otherwise silent street as I eased past the weathered stop sign at the corner of Elmwood and Pine. It was 2:13 in the morning, and the world felt suspended between breaths. The radio crackled once, a faint 10-4 from dispatch confirming my presence on the late-night patrol. I glanced at the thermometer, 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Not freezing, but cold enough that the chill cut through the fabric of my jacket like a sharpened blade. The streetlights here never seem to work right. One flickers, then the next stays dark for a block longer, then comes back on with a lazy glow. Tonight, they were all but dead, leaving the road ahead a tunnel of black. I thought about how many times I'd driven these exact streets, responded to burglaries, pulled over tailgaters, even broken up neighborhood squabbles. But there was something about the emptiness at this hour, about how darkness drapes itself around the houses, hiding every corner, that always made my pulse quicken. Dispatch had sent me out on a non-priority call, a possible hit-and-run involving a pedestrian. The address was a modest 2-story townhouse on Elmwood Drive, smack in the middle of a row of identical homes, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and you'd think nothing terrible ever happened. Possible pedestrian down, the message had said. Nothing in the world prepares you for what you actually see. When I drove up, headlights swinging, the beam cut across a woman lying face down on the concrete sidewalk in front of the house. Her body was still. I killed the engine, crouched, and felt the weight of the night press in on me. Leaves rustled somewhere beyond the darkness, and I heard a distant dog bark, once, twice, then silence. The air smelled like damp asphalt and something metallic, faint but unmistakable. I knelt beside her. Her hair was dark, damp with something sticky, and her breath had stopped. That visceral realization, the difference between a slow breath and nothing at all, hit me like a punch to the gut. I tugged off my gloves, rolled her onto her back, and saw 2 neat entry wounds high on her back, the kind you couldn't mistake. Gunshots, not a tire, not an accident. Dispatch, this is Unit 24. Possible homicide, Elmwood Drive. Requesting backup and coroner. My voice came out flat, controlled, but inside I could feel my heart racing. I pressed my hand to her chest. No pulse. I stood, eyes scanning. A neighbor appeared on a porch down the street, face lit in pale orange by a flickering lamp. "She ran out that door," he said, voice trembling like a leaf. He pointed to the townhouse entrance. The front door swung open on its hinges, revealing darkness beyond. My wife saw her come down the stairs. She was screaming. Sounded like she just ran out here. My partner, Officer Reyes, arrived in his cruiser a moment later. He crouched, checked the victim, then shook his head. "Shot," he confirmed quietly. We exchanged a look. Neither of us said it aloud, but the unspoken truth hung between us. This was no mere traffic fatality. This was deliberate violence, and the shooter was likely inside. Reyes swept his flashlight across the foyer. The white tile floor gleamed, until I shone the beam on smears of red across the door jamb. I drew my weapon, chambered around, and advanced into the house. The warmth inside was a sharp contrast to the chill outside, the smell of old carpeting mixed with something sharper, coppery. I called out, "Police! If anyone's here, make yourself known." Silence. My boots clicked on hardwood as I cleared the ground floor. Living room, kitchen, dining area. Not a soul in sight, but smears of blood led from the entrance hall toward the staircase. I looked at the handprints on the railing, dark, smeared. They told a story. Whoever had been injured had clung to the banister, made their way down the stairs in desperate flight. I climbed. Step by step, the blood spatters grew more frequent, more frantic. My flashlight cut through the gloom, illuminating framed photographs on the walls, family portraits taken in happier times, a little girl with curly hair wearing a bright red coat, a man and woman smiling, arms around each other, autumn leaves swirling behind them. I tried to read their names on the frames, but the reflections obscured the letters. At the top, there was a long hallway, the carpet threadbare in places, as if hundreds of feet had walked these boards before. My heart thumped loud enough I thought Reyes might hear it through the radio. I moved slowly, senses straining. The hush was oppressive, as though the house itself held its breath, waiting. "Reyes, you good down there?" I whispered. There was a soft crackle. "All clear, no sign of movement on ground floor," he replied. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I edged toward a slightly ajar door at the far end. I paused, thumb hovering over the grip of my pistol. Through the crack, I saw a room draped in shadows, a single lamp sputtering on a small bedside table. The walls were painted a muted blue, the color of a calm sea, jarringly peaceful compared to the crimson splatter on the carpet. On the bed lay a man, white shirt soaked dark, legs sprawled over the edge. He didn't move. I kicked the door open. "Police! Show me your hands!" I shouted, stepping in. The man's eyes flicked open, haunted and unfocused. He clutched something in his right hand. A music box, its lid cracked, the tiny ballerina frozen in mid-twirl. "Daniel Miller?" I asked, moving to his side. He tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. His other hand pressed against his wrist, soaking the bedsheet. A shallow cut, medical kit sitting unopened on the floor. He'd tried to end it. Guilt or grief, maybe both, drove him to that. Reyes burst in behind me and rushed to apply pressure to Miller's wrist. I crouched by the bed, shone my light on the box. A warped lullaby squeaked out faintly, as though the mechanism had seized but refused to stop. "Mrs. Miller," I murmured, recalling the name from the call. I stood, holstering my weapon. "Where's Laura? Where's your wife?" Daniel's gaze flicked toward the door, eyes wide. He whispered, She went after Emily's doll." I frowned. "Emily?" He closed his eyes, pain twisting his features. "Our daughter. We lost her last year, December. Hit by a car right here on the same sidewalk." Voice breaking. Laura snapped, said I was hiding something. I scanned the room. Memories of the smudged handprints on the stairs, the open front door. It made a terrible, dreadful kind of sense. We'd found Laura in pieces, shot, bleeding out on the pavement. But the deeper wound lived here, a man driven hollow by grief, turning on the only person left. I radioed for EMS and homicide. The music box's song warbled on, broken, invasive, and I slid down the wall, vision blurring. All around me, the quiet corridors of this house, its pictures and laughter stilled by one fateful break in a family that couldn't bear its own sorrow. I stepped outside later, dawn light creeping over the rooftops. Police tape flapped in the breeze. The victim's sheet had been carried away. I stood there in my jacket, eyes on the empty house, and somewhere inside me I heard the lullaby again, faint, haunting, as if the night itself refused to let go. And in that moment I understood. Some echoes of grief never fade. They cling to walls, to floors, to the hands that once held them. And when you chase a case like this, you're not just following bloodstains. You're tracing the path of a broken heart that rattles like a music box wound too tight. The morning light felt intrusive, slicing through the yellow police tape and spotlighting every chalk outline on the sidewalk. I stood at the edge of the scene, cruiser idling behind me, watching technicians kneel and dust for prints, their breath visible in the cold air. My bones still ached from the stair climb. Building entry protocol seldom involves chasing someone up a narrow staircase slick with blood. I ran a hand through my hair, tugged my collar higher. The lullaby from that warped music box echoed in my mind, its tinny notes more oppressive than the wind rattling the windows. I stepped away from the crowd clustered around the coroner's van and pulled out my notebook. I never used it in the field. Body cam footage and radio logs were the official record, but my own notes helped me remember the finer points, the moments that don't make the report. I scribbled the time, 6:17 a.m. The temperature, 38 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping. A thin layer of frost knotted on the neighbors' cars. Inside the house, every room felt haunted. The music box sat on the dresser in evidence storage. Later, I'd play its warped melody back in the interrogation room and wonder if grief itself could hum a tune. For now, I filed that thought under unanswered questions and focused on facts. 2 entry wounds high on Laura Miller's back, trajectory consistent with a shooter standing over her. Then a final wound to the chest, likely inflicted as she turned to face him. She'd staggered downstairs, left bloody footprints on each step, then emerged into the cold air and collapsed at the curb. Detective Patel arrived mid-morning, suit crisp, eyes sharp beneath a brimmed hat. He nodded at me. "You got the scene secured?" I did sweep the stairwell, checked for prints. Photos and slides are cataloged. I handed him my notes. Victim had defensive wounds on her forearms. Didn't see those until yesterday's autopsy. Patel frowned. So she fought back. "Yeah?" I shivered, though I'd stripped off my jacket hours ago. "And the husband tried to kill himself. Shallow cut on the wrist, only deep enough to sever the radial artery if he'd tried harder." I touched the spot on my forearm where adrenaline had left bruises from gripping the gun too tight. He was in shock, but he admitted it. Said he snapped over a year of misery, blaming her for Emily's death. Patel sighed. Grief-driven homicides aren't rare, but the execution, 2 shots to the back, then chest, that's personal. Brutal. He flipped through the photos. He didn't try to hide it. Left the front door open, didn't wipe the bloody handprints. He practically wrote his confession in blood. "Maybe he wanted us to find it," I said quietly. "Maybe part of him wanted someone to save her." Patel looked up, gave a tight nod. Or maybe he wanted to feel something other than numb. I spent the next hour going door to door, interviewing neighbors. Carla Jensen, 2 doors down, said she heard screaming around 2 a.m., a woman's high-panicked shriek, a thud, then nothing. No gunshots. The muffled nature of the shots had slipped past most. Only upon finding Laura did we realize. Carla's eyes welled. I called when I saw her on the sidewalk. I couldn't help her. The guilt in her voice was all too familiar. Every witness carries it, that regret of, I could have done more. I gave her my card, told her we'd need a statement. She nodded, voice cracking, then turned away. Back at the station, I watched the body cam footage on a loop. The timestamp flickered. 2:16:53 a.m. as I descended the stairs. 2:17:08 a.m. when I first touched Laura's shoulder. 15 seconds, that changed everything. In one frame, the hallway behind me seems darker, almost smoky. I paused it. It was just a shadow cast by the lamp across the hall. My stomach knotted. Sleep deprivation does that, makes every silhouette a threat. I reviewed the radio log. Unit 24, possible pedestrian down at 2:14 a.m., 10:50, homicide suspected. At 2:15 a.m., dispatch, need backup. At 2:15 a.m., 32 a.m., then static. Reyes's voice came in clear. I found him. Male, mid-30s, self-inflicted wound, pulse weak. That was 2:18 a.m. He'd cuffed Miller, applied a tourniquet, called for EMS. The interrogations began mid-afternoon. Detective Patel and I walked into the small interview room, the one with no windows and a single flickering light overhead. Miller, seated on a metal chair, looked pale, gaunt, like an aging man twice his years. His wrists were bound, but his eyes were sharp. I took a seat across from him. "Daniel, I want you to tell me, in your own words, what happened last night." He stared at the table, fingering the music box I'd placed in front of him. I didn't want to," he whispered. His voice wavered. "Emily was everything. That day he swallowed hard. She was killed right there, on their driveway. I watched as the car, it didn't even stop, and my wife, she never got over it. Laura, she blamed me." I nodded, letting him speak. Months of counseling, pills to help her sleep. Then she started seeing things, hearing Emily's laughter in the halls. She said she'd found footprints in the backyard, little muddy prints leading nowhere. He shook his head. Told me the house was cursed. I thought she was losing her mind. He paused, eyes meeting mine. I stayed up with her that night, 2 a.m., when she left the bedroom. I heard a thud, then a scream. I grabbed the gun, licensed weapon, kept for home defense, but I didn't think. I thought she was some stranger breaking in to punish me. She climbed the stairs, I followed. I saw her turn, eyes wild, and I pulled the trigger. His lips trembled. Then I realized it was her. He sank back. I tried to end it. I thought maybe if we were together again. He broke off, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry." Patel stepped in. "You're under arrest for murder. You have the right to an attorney." I left the room, feeling like I'd swallowed a lead weight. Outside, the rain had begun to fall in fine lines, turning the pavement slick. Streetlights reflected in the wet asphalt like a river of molten gold. I walked back to my car, jacket soaked at the shoulders. That night at home, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the music box's lullaby looping in my mind. I thought about Laura, alone, terrified, wounded, desperate enough to flee her own home, and about Daniel, so hollowed by grief he became the executioner of his own pain. I wondered if any of us ever truly escape the monsters we create in our minds. I checked my phone. No new messages. I typed a note to myself. Follow up on neighbor calls. Toxicology report on Miller. Background check on Laura's counseling sessions. I saved it, then lay back. The ceiling fan whirred, casting spinning shadows. At 2:13 a.m., I woke again, drawn to my desk where the music box sat, brought back from evidence by my own request. I lifted the lid, expecting silence. Instead, it creaked to life, the ballerina spinning once, twice, then grinding to a halt. Its song was warped, fragmentary, the same broken lullaby I'd heard at the scene. I realized then, grief isn't a haunting, it's the haunter. It sneaks into your dreams, your waking hours, and when you least expect it, it calls your name in a voice you cannot ignore. I closed my eyes and asked myself, was I pursuing justice, or just chasing an echo of a broken heart? When the music stopped, I left it wound. Some cases never get fully closed, and some nights the only way to keep going is to let the darkness play on, so you can recognize it the next time it calls. The sun was barely up when I walked into the precinct, the early light filtering through blinds and striping the linoleum floor with gold. My sergeant, a grizzled veteran named Hudson, was already waiting at his desk, fingers steepled as he reviewed the emerging case files. "Carter," he said without looking up, "that Miller homicide is getting traction. Local news hit it last night. Tragic townhouse slaying. And now everyone wants answers." His tone was neutral, but I caught the edge of pressure in his voice. I set my duffel bag down and pulled out the music box, still rattling faintly even though it sat on evidence hold. "They're running the coroner's preliminary report at 11, I said, voice low. 2 shots to the back, 1 to the chest. Entry wounds consistent with close range. I tapped the lid. The tarnished tin ballerina refused to move. Hudson waved a hand. "We'll need your statement for internal affairs. Just protocol, and Miller's interview tape goes to homicide by noon." I nodded, feeling the weight of every eyeball in the precinct on my back. This wasn't just another routine follow-up, the layers of grief, the public spectacle, and that broken lullaby all combined into something I couldn't shake. At 10:30 a.m., the media caravan rolled in, cameras and microphones poking through the police tape like metal weeds. Reporters clamored for quotes. I slipped into a conference room with tinted glass. Hudson read a prepared statement. "We are pursuing all leads. Our hearts go out to the victim's family. No further comments at this time." Flashbulbs popped. When it was over, I stepped outside and felt my stomach twist. Headlines would scream, "Music Box Mystery tomorrow." Back at my desk, I replayed Miller's interrogation on a loop. The audio crackled. "Emily, she was our light." I paused it at a sob. His grief was raw, an open wound I'd never want to bear. But underneath it lay something else. A fleeting note of fear, as if he'd seen another presence in that house. I scrubbed the thought away. Too far-fetched, I told myself. By midday, the forensic lab called. Partial prints on the music box matched neither Miller nor Laura. "Looks like a child's print," the technician said. My heart raced. "Could be Emily's," I suggested. But she cautioned, "We don't have her prints in the system." I thanked her and hung up, staring at that box as if it might confess its secrets. I found Reyes in the break room, pouring coffee. He looked up, tired. "Heard about the prints?" I asked. He shrugged. "Odd, sure. But touched while moving evidence? Could be contamination." I nodded, but felt the hairs on my neck prickle. Something about that music box didn't add up. That afternoon I returned to Elmwood Drive. Yellow tape was down, boards covering the windows. An overgrown vine curled up the side of the townhouse like a silent witness. I walked the sidewalk where Laura fell, scuffed concrete stained darker in spots, and wondered if grief could imprint itself onto brick and mortar. A neighbor peered through their blinds, eyes red. I tipped my cap, offered a gentle nod, and moved on. Back in the station's evidence room, I slid on gloves and lifted the box. Under blacklight, I saw a faint outline, child-sized fingers pressed into the paint on the lid. Not smudges, but deliberate grooves, like someone had traced a path. My breath caught. I ran a soft swab along the lines. The thought of Emily's tiny hand guiding me chilled me deeper than any winter wind. That night, the precinct was quiet. I sat alone at my desk, surrounded by case files and coffee rings. My radio crackled. "Unit 24, do you copy?" It was dispatch, routine. I responded, "Unit 24 here." Then came a whisper, "Emily." I froze, hand on the mic. Static filled the speaker. I tapped the button again. Dispatch, what's your call sign? Silence, then a click. My radio fell silent as if drained of power. I glanced at the clock. 2:13 a.m. The same time I first saw her on the pavement. A knot of dread formed in my gut. I shook my head, convinced it was fatigue or a stray broadcast. Still, I grabbed my coat and stepped outside into the parking lot. The air was sharp, scent of rain on hot asphalt. As I crossed the lot, something skittered behind me. Light, like a child's footsteps. I spun around. Nothing. Just the buzz of a street lamp overhead. My pulse thundered. I swallowed hard. Was it the music box following me? I forced myself to breathe evenly, eyes scanning the shadows. Back at home, I left the swabbed evidence on my dresser, unauthorized, but I needed to see it again. In the pale glow of my lamp, I peered at the test results scribbled on a pad. Small, partial print, size consistent with 6-year-old. My daughter had been 6 when she died. A shiver ran through me as that lullaby began playing softly from the dresser. It wasn't wound. I snapped my head up. The music box lay closed. No mechanism to turn, no string to pull. And yet I heard the warped notes, slow and haunting, winding down into nothing. I realize now that this case isn't just about a grief-torn husband or a tragic death. It's about everything we refuse to let go, every echo of loss we carry inside. And sometimes those echoes find a way back into the world, demanding to be heard. The night the music box played itself again, I sat bolt upright in bed, every muscle coiled like a spring. The soft, tinny notes wound around my brain, slow and deliberate, echoing off the walls of my small apartment. I flicked on the lamp. Its yellow glow revealed the box on the dresser, lid closed, its ballerina frozen. My fingers trembled as I reached out, fingertips brushing the metal. Silence. But in my ears, the lullaby lingered, distant and warped, as if carried on a wind from another world. I forced myself up, tossing aside the thin cover. The police blazer lay draped over a chair. I slipped it on, the weight of its fabric a reminder of the badge and gun I carried. I padded across the floor, boots thudding softly against the hardwood, and buried the music box deep inside my desk drawer, wedging folders on top to keep it from rolling free. Then I sat at the desk, pulled out the printed swab report, partial prints consistent with a 6-year-old unidentified. My pulse thundered as I reread the lines. Emily had been 6. I shut the drawer and reached for my coffee mug, cold now, the dregs of last night's caffeine. The precinct's fluorescent lights burned behind my eyelids every time I closed them. The memory of those flickering street lamps on Elmwood haunted me more powerfully than any ghost story. I flashed back to the staircase, the railing slick with her blood, the photos in the hall, laughter frozen in frames, a family shattered. The next morning, I trudged into the station before sunrise. Detective Patel was waiting by the roll call board, flipping through the latest reports. "Carter," he said softly, "lab found no gunpowder on the railing or on Laura's clothing. That means she wasn't shot on the stairs." He looked up, eyebrows drawn. "Trajectory analysis suggests the shots were fired inside the bedroom." I nodded slowly, stomach knotting, which means Miller led her out, almost to the door, then fired again. I stared at the board's sticky notes. Husband motive, grief. Victim wounds, 2 to back, 1 to chest. Music box, unusual prints. Patel sighed, pulling the box's photo into focus on the screen. "You need a break, Carter." I shook my head. "Not yet." Each new detail felt like a splinter under my skin, relentless, impossible to ignore. I scanned my schedule, Interviews with neighbors, forensic rechecks, coroner's deeper report due tomorrow. No time for a break. That afternoon, I drove back to Elmwood Drive. The boarded windows seemed to stare at me like blank eyes. The air was thick and still, the cicadas silent for once, as though even the insects respected the house's misery. I pulled on latex gloves and pried off a section of boarding, exposing a cracked window. Crouching, I shone my flashlight inside, dust motes dancing in the beam. I slipped through, boots landing on shattered glass and sawdust. Inside, the silence was oppressive. I followed the faint smell of old perfume. Laura's, I thought, down the hallway. At the foot of the stairs, I knelt and ran my gloved hand along the banister. It was smooth, worn, no fresh smears now, but I traced the grooves with my fingertips, seeking any residual heat of panic. Nothing. I rose and crept toward the bedroom door, which hung off its hinges. The mattress lay slumped, the sheets tangled. On the floor beside the bed, I found a single, small shoe, pink, scuffed at the toe. My breath caught. It couldn't be Emily's, or could it? I lifted it, fingers brushing the rubber sole, a faint imprint on the heel, half erased, childhood, lost. I stood, flipping the shoe in my hand. A scuttling noise behind me made me whirl around, gun drawn, flashlight beam rocking wildly. Nothing but wallpaper peeling in the corner. Heart hammering. I headed back to the hallway when a soft giggle echoed, distant and childlike. I froze. "Who's there?" I called, voice low. Silence. Then the giggle again, closer, as if someone just behind the wall. I advanced, hand against the wallpaper. It felt warm, almost pulsing. I pressed harder. Wallpaper tore away, revealing raw plaster. No crawl space, no child, just darkness. My radio crackled to life. "Unit 24, dispatch. Are you reading?" I exhaled, voice steady. "I'm clear." But I hesitated, scanning the gloom. The giggle came once more, right behind me. I spun. My flashlight caught something small on the floor. Laura's locket, chain broken, its glass inset cracked. I picked it up, saw the tiny photo inside. Emily, smiling in a dress, blonde curls framing her face. A chill rippled through me. I closed the locket and pocketed it. Time to leave. I crawled back out through the broken window and stacked the boards back, nailing them loosely just enough to keep prying eyes out. My legs felt shaky as I crossed the yard. Overhead, a single streetlight flickered. I glanced back at the house. In the darkened window, I thought I saw a figure, a child, standing, still as stone. That night in the station, Reyes cornered me near the lockers. "Carter, you look like hell." He handed me a styrofoam cup. "Take this." I stared at the lukewarm coffee. He continued quietly. "You've been off the grid. No lunch breaks, missed roll calls. This case is eating you." I clenched my jaw. "I'm close, Reyes. Something isn't right. That music box, those prints, that shoe." My voice trailed. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't let it swallow you. Sometimes you gotta step back." I nodded, but the knot in my gut tightened. I moved past him, back into the evidence vault under harsh fluorescent lights. The music box sat on a shelf, silent now. I picked it up, opened it. The ballerina didn't move. I set it down and pulled out the locket and shoe, laid them alongside the box. I photographed the trio, evidence of a family's ruin. By 2:13 a.m., I was back home again, notebook open, scribbling timelines and theories. My hands shook as I wrote. I paused, closing my eyes. In the quiet, I heard it, footsteps pacing above the floorboards, slow and deliberate. A child's footsteps. I stood, every nerve alive. I whispered, "Emily?" There was no reply, only the echo of a lullaby winding down somewhere overhead. I raised my flashlight, beam slicing through the darkness. The ceiling fan's blades cast spinning shadows. The footsteps stopped. Silence. And then a single tap, tap, tap on the door behind me. Light, like fingernails. I didn't dare turn around. My whole life had taught me to approach with caution, to clear rooms methodically, but this was different. My heart hammered as I took a step forward, the beam illuminating nothing but the empty hallway. The tap came again, louder now, 3 times, as if someone was counting. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The doorway lay open, dark beyond, no child, no specter, just the worn carpet. I swallowed. The lullaby began again, soft, distant, and I realized it wasn't coming from the music box. It was all around me, in the air, memories, echoes, grief given voice. I drew my weapon, trembling. "Show yourself," I ordered, voice cracking. Only the hush replied. My blood pounded in my ears as I listened to the phantom melody. I wondered what I would find if I dared to follow it through the house, up into the attic, into the memories of a little girl who should be gone. The moment the attic door creaked open, a shaft of moonlight pierced the gloom, carving a pale rectangle on the floorboards. My flashlight cut through the darkness in a trembling beam, revealing the attic's dusty expanse. Crates piled high, yellowed insulation clinging to rafters, and old family trunks stamped with the miller's name. The air was thick with stale heat and the faintest echo of that broken lullaby, as though I'd carried it here in my bones. I took a steadying breath and stepped inside, boots crunching on scattered debris. The beam of my light danced across the walls, catching faded wallpaper patterned with children's toys, rocking horses, building blocks, a carousel horse in mid-prance. My pulse hammered as I realized this had once been a playroom, long abandoned but still echoing with laughter. I moved deeper, my service weapon drawn and held low, every sense straining. Footsteps, software, almost silent against the old wood. I froze, listening. They sounded again, light, padding at the far edge of the attic, where the roof sloped low and the shadows pooled like ink. "Emily?" I whispered, voice hushed. No reply, but the steps came closer, pausing just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I edged forward, heart so loud I feared it would give me away. My boots passed a battered toy chest, its lid thrown open to reveal a scattering of dolls and picture books. One doll lay face down, its porcelain cheek cracked, and a single glassy blue eye staring up at me. I knelt, fingertips brushing dust aside, and righted it. The doll's hair was blonde, exactly like Emily's, and its dress was faded pink. Instinct told me to put it down, but I lifted it and felt its weight in my hands, cool, unnervingly solid. A whisper of movement behind me made me whirl around. My flashlight caught a glimpse of small footprints in the dust, leading to a low trapdoor set flush with the floor. A child's shoe print, half the size of Laura's single shoe, etched into the wooden boards. My breath caught. I straightened, pointing the beam at the hatch. Underneath, I saw a frayed ribbon tied around its latch, the same shade of pink as the doll's dress. My radio crackled to life, static first, then Reyes's voice. "Carter? You there? You missed roll call. We're about to pull the footage. Everything's gone dark in the evidence room." He sounded worried. I flicked the mic on my shoulder. "I'm okay. Found something up here. I'll be down soon." I released the ribbon and lifted the trapdoor. It groaned as I pried it up, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. My barricade training kicked in, checking corners, sweeping the beam down each rung. The ladder ended in a crawl space no bigger than a child's closet. I squeezed through, heart pounding so hard I thought it would shatter my ribs. On the other side, the beam illuminated a small, square chamber. Bare floorboards, a single picture frame leaning against the wall, and a dollhouse, an exact replica of the townhouse below. I dropped to my knees beside it. Every window, every crooked miniature porch, every step of the staircase was faithfully rendered. At the top of the tiny stairs a figure knelt, no more than 2 inches tall, a child doll with a painted face, its head tilted toward the living room window. I leaned closer. Inside the dollhouse, I saw tiny red spots on the miniature staircase railing, and a front door lying open. In the attic of the dollhouse, a toy music box sat on a windowsill, its lid cracked. I pressed my face to the glass, breath fogging the plastic. My eyes followed the doll's gaze, straight at the front door. Beyond, an even smaller doll figure stood in the yard, hands raised as if beckoning. I recoiled, heart racing. My skin crawled with the thought that someone had constructed this scene for me, and the only logical someone was Emily, but she was dead. Behind me, a soft giggle resonated in the cramped space, and I spun, gun trained on the spot where I'd entered. Silence, then footsteps, lighter, fading away up the ladder. I felt the air shift as though something had just passed through me, a cold rush against my neck. I edged back to the trap door, climbed up and slammed it shut, heart thundering. The attic felt impossibly large now, every shadow a potential hiding place. I backed toward the exit, doll still clutched in one hand. The beam of my flashlight landed on the open toy chest. It had shifted. Dolls lay strewn across the floor, each one positioned to face the attic door. Their glass eyes reflected my light, unblinking. I swallowed hard, stepping around them, and found my way back to the hatch. I descended the ladder 2 rungs at a time, adrenaline fueling each step. In the hallway below, my flashlight caught a movement. A small handprint on the plaster wall, fresh and damp with dust. I touched it. Cool, gritty. It felt impossibly warm in contrast to the night air. Beneath it, someone had scrawled a single word in the dust. Daddy. My grip tightened on the doll. I heard a soft creak behind me, like a child shifting weight, and slowly turned. The doorway at the end of the hall was pitch black. I cleared my throat, voice unsteady. Emily? No answer. Then, from just inside the room, a lullaby, tinny, halting, unmistakable, began to play without any visible source. Each note drifted down the hallway like a summons. I stepped forward, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't fight. The music led me to the front door, where moonlight lay in a wide fan on the floor. There, in the center, sat the toy music box. Lid open, ballerina spinning erratically, her arms extended as if begging. I bent and closed the lid. The music cut off mid-note. The hallway behind me was empty, but I sensed someone just out of sight. I called again, louder. I'm here, Emily. I know you're here. Silence swallowed my words. Then a soft tap, 3 times, exactly like before, resonated from upstairs. My blood ran cold. I wasn't alone. The stairwell loomed, inviting and horrifying. I set the doll and music box on the console table by the door, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other, and crept back toward the stairs. The steps were unbearably quiet. At the top, I paused. The attic hatch was closed, but now a faint glow spilled from its edges. I pressed my ear to the door. Inside, the lullaby hummed, faster this time, eager. My reflection in the hatch's wood grain showed my face, pale, drawn, haunted. I reached out and opened the hatch. My flashlight beam sliced into the attic once more. In the circle of light stood a little girl, her back to me, hair the color of straw. She wore a faded pink dress just like the dolls. She lifted her head, and in that silent moment I saw her face, the hollowed sockets where eyes once sparkled, the lips fixed in a soft, sad smile. She turned, raising a tiny hand. Her voice, faint as a memory, whispered, "Daddy?" The attic's rafters groaned. My heart shattered with recognition. Emily wasn't guiding me. She was calling me home. I stumbled back, stumbling over the toy chest, the music box clattering to the floor. In that instant, the attic plunged into darkness, and the hatch slammed shut with a finality that rattled my bones. I pounded on the wood, pistol clicking emptily, but no one answered. Only the echo of a lullaby winding down to silence. Downstairs, the front door burst open as though pushed by an unseen hand. The wind carried the whisper of a child's laughter through the house. I held my breath, every instinct screaming to run, but my feet were anchored to the spot. The doll lay at my feet, porcelain cheek chipped, one glass eye missing. In its place, a dark circle stained with dust. I stared at it, mind reeling. Was this a haunting born of guilt? A grief-driven hallucination? Or had I really crossed the boundary between life and something darker? The night pressed in around me, and all I could hear was the faintest echo of those 3 taps on the door, counting down to some reckoning. I don't know how long I stood there before the first light of dawn bled across the floorboards. When I finally found the strength to move, I left the house without looking back, the attic quiet behind me. But I couldn't leave the doll, nor the music box, though both called to me in nightmares and waking hours. Now, every patrol shift I drive past Elmwood Drive, windows shuttered, lights out. I check my rearview mirror, half expecting to see her little figure standing on the porch, waiting. And sometimes, when the radio is silent, I swear I hear that lullaby drifting in over the scanner. I'm still not sure what I believe, that Emily's spirit is trapped here, restless, or that grief itself can manifest in shapes we cannot explain. All I know is part of me went up into that attic and never came back down. So I ask you this: what would you do if the one you lost found a way to call you home? The air inside the cruiser felt colder than outside. I remember glancing at the clock on the dash, 23:47, and forcing my fingers to relax on the steering wheel. November had tipped into its second day, and a damp mist clung to every surface on Elm Street. A single street lamp flickered overhead, its pale halo widening and contracting like a dying eye. My radio crackled, cutting through the engine's idle. Unit 47, we've got a priority 1 disturbance at 8 Elm. Caller reports someone banging on their door, wearing a Halloween mask. Possible weapons. Respond code 2, I thumbed the mic. 47 copies, on my way. I flicked on the overhead lights, blue and red pulses washing over the brick row houses, turning them into a silent carnival facade. In that second, the weight of the night settled on my shoulders. I'd been on force for just over 18 months, and every call still carried the potential to shatter me. The older guys talked about that first one forever sticking in your head. This felt like it might be mine. By the time I pulled into the gravel drive, my breath was fogging the side window. I saw no one milling outside, no silhouettes darting behind windows, nothing. Just dead leaves drifting across the asphalt and the distant hum of traffic on Main. My boots crunched as I climbed out. I could taste the damp air in my throat. I inhaled deep, forcing calm, then clicked on my flashlight and advanced toward the front entrance. The hallway was narrow, old paint peeling at the corners, a flicker of mold creeping up the walls. The floor smelled damp, musty, like something had been rotting behind those doors for a while. I knocked on the first door to my left, protocol for disturbance calls. 2 sharp raps, then, "Eastville PD, what's going on in here?" A moment's silence. Then a shaky voice. I heard pounding, and then screaming. She swallowed hard. "I locked my door already, I called it in." "Thank you, ma'am," I said, scribbling a note in my book. I moved down the corridor. Half the doors were ajar, half slammed shut. Each one a black rectangle swallowing what happened inside. The faint smell of cigarette smoke drifted out from one apartment, accompanied by the faint hum of a television left on. I flicked my light over it, Channel 7 News, a midday rerun about the football game that happened last month. Life outside these walls felt impossibly distant. At apartment 3A, the door cracked open just enough for me to slip through. The woman inside, late 30s, mascara smudged from crying, stood pressed against the far wall, one arm braced on the door jamb. Her eyes were wide, her cheeks pale. "He came in here," she croaked, masked, growling, banging. Then I heard a pop, like a gunshot. I slammed the door, locked it, and called. Her breath was stuttering. I knelt to meet her gaze. "You're safe now," I said, voice steady. "Can you tell me what he looked like? Anything you remember?" She swallowed, lower lip quivering. He wore some cheap rubber mask, like Michael Myers, but wrong. The eyes were empty, and his clothes, she trailed off. They were soaked, dark. I thought it was fake at first. She shivered. Then the hallway echoed with screaming from down the corridor. It was horrible. I thanked her, then edged back into the hallway. My heart was hammering, adrenaline spiking. Every instinct screamed to find the guy, or the victims still in jeopardy. I called dispatch, updating them. 47 to dispatch, 1 complainant secured, multiple possible victims down the hall. Send backup and EMS. I'm checking 3B onward. I moved on, flashlight beam slicing through the haze. Each closed door felt like a tomb. I felt my chest tighten as I approached 3C. The door was slightly open, just enough to see scratched scuffs on the frame. I pressed my shoulder to it and eased inside. The place was dark. Only the faint glow of a TV behind a curtain filtered through. The smell hit me before I saw him. Coppery and acrid. He crouched in the center of the room, legs splayed like a wounded animal, his head hanging so low I didn't immediately spot the mask. When he moved, I froze. He jerked upright, and I saw bone where flesh should have been. His jaw was mangled, half his lower face gone. He wore a cracked rubber mask pushed to the top of his head like a broken crown. Blank, terrified eyes met mine as he raised a trembling hand, pale and shaking. My breath caught. "Sir," I said softly, stepping forward and holstering my taser. I reached for cuffs, moving with slow, deliberate calm. "My name is Officer Bradley. You're going to be okay. Just hold still, all right?" The man tried to speak, but only a wet rasp escaped, a leaky whisper of agony. He shifted, revealing a dark stain at the collar of his jacket. Fresh blood, still warm. I pulled gloves on and placed a hand on his shoulder. His body jolted at the contact. I keyed my mic. 47 to dispatch. 1 male subject down. Self-inflicted gunshot wound suspected. Significant facial trauma. Please send paramedics immediately. Outside, blue lights danced against the walls. But inside, time slowed. I knelt beside him and unholstered my radio mic. "Sir, can you hear me? Talk to me if you can." He nodded once, lips parted in a dry gasp. I assessed the wound as best I could through ripped fabric and splintered bone. The angle was odd, upwards, toward the chin, but the bullet exit wasn't clear. It looked like he'd tried to kill himself, but something about the ragged wound suggested otherwise. My gut twisted. Heat flared in my chest, not anger, but something darker. Sorrow, rage, helplessness. I cleared my throat. "Stay with me, okay? Help's coming." I brushed hair from his forehead. He closed his eyes briefly, then flicked them open, staring at me. The tears carved red tracks through dried blood on his cheeks. He whispered one word. "Why?" I choked on my next breath. "Why what?" My voice sounded foreign in the silence. He tried again. "Left. Alone." His gaze drifted toward the hallway. I craned my head. Every neighbor still behind closed doors, lights off, no faces at the peepholes. One apartment TV flickered. A child's laugh echoed from down the hall. I slammed my fist lightly on the wall. "You're not alone anymore," I growled. "I've got you." My own voice trembled. I radioed dispatch again. Get anyone to open doors, this is a medical emergency." Then I turned back. His breathing was ragged, uncertain. He clutched my sleeve. I saw something, relief, trust. His fingers dug in like he believed I'd fight for him. A siren cut through the hallway floor, then 2 sets of sirens, EMS and a second unit. Lights bathed the corridor in harsh white beams that stung the eyes. I scooted back. The paramedics moved in, efficient and precise. I handed them a quick summary. Self-inflicted or foul play, massive jaw trauma. No active bleeding besides face. Unresponsive at times. They worked in a blur, tourniquet, airway, suction. I hovered at the edge, watching his chest rise and fall. Then they loaded him onto the stretcher and carried him out. Every step echoed, like the world was holding its breath. Outside, the night swallowed them up. I leaned against the wall, knees shaking. Dispatch pinged. "All units, please clear the scene. Victim en route to St. Mary's Hospital. Detectives will follow for statements." I pocketed my radio. My pulse finally slowed enough for thought. Doors remained closed. TV lights still flickered behind peepholes. The neighbor's child laughter had stopped. The corridor was utterly, bone-deep, silent. I closed my eyes and pressed my forehead to the chipped plaster. I tried to sort what happened. A man in a mask, disturbing calls, neighbors too frightened to help. A wounded soul searching for relief, turned away, and me, arriving moments too late to stop him from dying, possibly at someone else's hand. I exhaled, tasting rubber and iron on my tongue, even though I'd said nothing. My boots scraped the floor as I stood and walked back to my cruiser. The mist had thickened outside, swallowing the building behind me. I flicked on my headlights and watched Elm Street vanish in the beams. That was the night I learned how thin the line is between villain and victim, and how quickly a neighborhood becomes a prison. The last thing I remember before starting my engine was the mask lying in the gutter, a cracked replica of horror, soaked in blood, its empty eye holes staring at the pavement. I didn't answer dispatch's next ping. I just sat there, palms flat on the wheel, wondering how many doors behind me were still closed, and why. I parked outside the station beneath a single flickering lamp and sat in the cruiser for a long moment, the radio silent, the edges of my vision pulsing in the strobe glow of the blue lights fading behind me. My uniform felt stiff against my skin, soaked with sweat from adrenaline and cold rain earlier. I should have filed the report immediately, flesh wound or not. A man nearly died outside my jurisdiction tonight. But I wasn't ready. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and closed my eyes, trying to scrub the image of his empty eye sockets and torn flesh out of my mind. The stale coffee in my cup holder had gone cold, a bitter reminder of how long my shift had stretched. When I finally forced myself out, the station doors swung open on silent hinges. The lobby was empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry bees. A lone coffee pot murmured in the break room, half a pot gone. I poured myself a cup, black and bitter, and leafed through the paper logs on the clipboard by the front desk. There it was. 2347, disturbance call to 8 Elm, mask-wearing subject, male, approximately 30s, covered in what appeared to be blood. Self-inflicted wound suspected. Transported to St. Mary's. I tapped my pen against the paper. Transported. Not pronounced. Alive, maybe. The ambiguity clawed at me. I wandered back to my locker, stripped off my jacket, and ran a hand through my hair. Every fiber of my being demanded sleep. Instead, I headed to the detective's office, where Detective Alvarez sat behind his desk, scrolling through images on a laptop. He looked up, concern flickering across his face. Bradley heard about Elm Street. He shut the screen and gestured to the chair opposite. Give me what you've got. I recounted the call, the neighbor's fear, the broken CCTV, the way he'd been knocking on doors, begging. For what? I still wasn't sure. Alvarez nodded after each point, his expression unreadable. When I reached the part where the man touched my sleeve, I saw something shift in Alvarez's eyes. Empathy, maybe guilt. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. People can be cruel even to someone in obvious distress, he murmured. We'll canvass the building first thing. Neighbors, business owners, anyone who might have heard something. In the meantime, get some rest, Bradley. Rest. The word mocked me. I knew Alvarez was right. But as I left his office, every step felt like trudging through tar. Back in the locker room, I slipped into plain clothes, a hoodie and jeans, then returned to my cruiser, which I'd left idling. The station lights faded behind me as I guided the car back onto Elm Street. It was after midnight. The mist had thickened, wrapping the houses in a gauzy shroud. I parked at the curb and grabbed my flashlight and notepad. Elm Street at this hour was different. Empty porches, dead silence, only the distant hum of a highway. I approached the building's side entrance, careful not to squelch the dead leaves. The doorknob turned under my gloved hand, and the interior smelled of mildew and old smoke, the same scent I'd inhaled hours ago. I clicked on my flashlight and swept the beam across the hallway. The bloodstains on the floor had been mostly cleaned, but faint smears remained. Dusky lines that spoke of panic and desperation. I bent to touch one, fingertips trembling. It was sticky under my glove. I moved to the network panel carved into a wooden panel beside the door to the laundry room. The cover hung loose, wires spilling. I pried it open further. Coax cables cut cleanly, fiber ripped. Whoever had disabled the CCTV had done it quickly, efficiently, like they knew exactly what they were doing. I traced a twisted pair of wires to a junction box where the panel had been reinstalled afterward. The screws were fresh. Whoever it was hadn't tried to cover their tracks entirely. My pulse spiked. This wasn't just a panic-driven suicide. Something darker was at play. A predator walking these corridors before the first call. I pictured him pressing his ear against the door of 2B, listening for movements. Maybe he'd watched me drive past earlier. I swallowed hard. I had to find him, or at least figure out who he was before someone else got hurt. A low echo made me whirl around, the scrape of a shoe against floor tile. I raised my flashlight, beam dancing off chipped paint. "Police," I called, voice firm. "Show yourself." Silence answered. My chest tightened. The building felt like a lungless body. No breath, no warmth, just stillness. Something shifted at the far end of the hall. I crept forward, each footfall muted. The light caught something on the floor. A small rubber fragment, part of the mask he'd worn. I knelt and picked it up, fingertips brushing a gritty mix of plaster and dust. The fragment was stretched, torn at the edge, as if ripped off in a struggle. I pocketed it and stood, shining the light on every door. They were all closed now, nailed shut from the inside. Keys still in locks, peepholes dark. No one came to help the man in need. Why? Fear, yes, but at what cost? A sudden thud echoed behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. The light swept the stairwell entrance, empty. A distant hum like a machine. I dropped to one knee, ear against the floor, listening. The hum grew, a faint buzz of electricity. The breaker panel in 1C. I sprinted for it, flashlight bobbing. My hand hit the metal box, and I yanked it open. The breakers were thrown, off for most circuits, on for one. I flipped them back instinctively. Lights flickered on down the hall like eyes opening. I exhaled, relief and dread twisting together. Then a voice, soft, distant, familiar. "Help me." I froze. The tone was raspy, wounded. It came from the unit at the far end, 1A. The door was closed, but the faint cry cut through the newfound brightness like a knife. I drew my taser, tensed every muscle. "Hold on, I'm coming." As I stepped forward, adrenaline surged so violently my vision narrowed. The words echoed in my mind. "Help me." Not a plea from a phantom, but a dying whisper, frail, urgent. I reached the door and yanked it open in one motion. The room was empty, furniture overturned, curtains twisted. The single overhead bulb cast jagged shadows across the walls. No one was inside. My heart thudded again. I swept the beam across the floor, a smear of red, fresh, glistening. It trailed toward the window. I followed it, hand trembling on the windowsill. The pane was cracked, spider-webbed from impact. I pressed my palm against the glass and peered out into the mist. Fog and darkness met me, and at the edge of visibility, a shape. Tall, lean, standing just out of reach. No mask this time, but the silhouette was unmistakable. It turned its head slightly as though listening. I called out, voice breaking, "Stop!" The figure took a step back, vanishing into the fog. My flashlight beam quivered as I pounded against the window. Then silence. The hum of the building died again. I backed away, mind racing. I reached for my radio, but my fingers froze. I realized I'd left it back at my cruiser. Alone, unarmed, beyond this taser and standing in the center of a trap. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer, backup and EMS. But here, in this corridor, I was the only one, and the figure in the mist was still out there, waiting. I turned to face the hall, heartbeat echoing in my ears. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide. But I was a cop. I moved forward, flashlight aimed at the darkness. My breath steadied, and I thought, tonight's just the beginning. I stepped back into my cruiser, heart hammering so loud my ears rang. The promise of backup was hours away. The detectives would arrive with daylight, but until then, it was just me and the echoes of that hallway. I flipped on the dome light and glanced at the dash clock. 0017. More than half an hour had passed since I first set foot in that apartment building. My phone weighed heavy in my pocket, the screen dark. Every instinct told me to call in, to get more units here, but dispatch had been clear, medical and detectives only. They didn't want more flashing lights, more panic. I pinched the bridge of my nose and exhaled, wishing I could scrub the image of that mask fragment from my mind. Instead, I pulled out that torn rubber piece, turning it between gloved fingers. It was greasy with dust, stiff where it had dried. I slipped it into an evidence bag and tucked it into the console. Evidence chain intact. I closed the lid and leaned back, exhaling into the cold glass of the windshield. Then, The radio crackled. 47, this is dispatch. Detective Alvarez en route. No additional units available until 0400. Anyone at scene can assist in perimeter. I thumbed the mic. Copy that, 47, standing by. The hallway was a maze out there. I'd need to wrestle with my own nerves just to keep going. I started the engine and drove the few blocks to the precinct, windows down despite the chill. The night air felt like truth, sharp and unforgiving, blasting away the fog in my mind. At the station, the fluorescent lobby felt unreal, antiseptic. I headed straight for Detective Bureau. Alvarez looked up from a whiteboard scribbled with notes. Lines connected sketches of the building and bullet trajectories. His face was drawn, dark rings under his eyes. "You pulled this from the dash cam?" he asked, pointing to a grainy frame of a figure in a mask, half obscured. "No," I said, rubbing my temples. "Neighbors. Someone managed to snag a shot on their phone before the camera went dark. It's not great, but it's something." Alvarez nodded, sliding the frame toward me. This was at 2345. He appears at the back entrance, mask on, head down. Then he's gone by 2346. 2 minutes before your call. I stared at the image. Lanky, coat fluttering, mask low. The grainy white light from a security lamp made the figure look like a specter. "So he disabled the cameras after that," I said. "The front hallway cameras, the network panel, everything. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." "Which means premeditation," Alvarez said. "I've pulled building permits. No recent electrical work. Whoever did this is unaffiliated, an outsider." I closed my eyes, so he came in, stalked the corridor, waited for calls, then tried to kill himself. My voice cracked. Or something drove him to that. Detective Alvarez leaned back. "Bradley, you need to get some rest. I'll handle the canvassing. You've done enough tonight." I opened my mouth to argue, but something inside me snapped. "No," I said quietly. "I need to see it again." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Fine. But take my partner, State Trooper Green, with you. He's on standby." Within 20 minutes, Green, a stoic trooper with a surgeon's precision, pulled on gloves in the cruiser as he checked his weapon. No bright lights, no sirens. We drove in silence back to Elm Street. The fog had thickened into a wall. Green clicked his flashlight on at the door. "All right, let's do this." Inside, the hallway was colder. My boots left echoes. I counted doors as we passed. 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A. Each one a portal into someone else's world. Green moved beside me. Calm, professional. At 3C, I paused. The air felt heavier here, like the building itself remembered what happened. I lowered my voice. "This is where it all went wrong." Green crouched and shone his light on the floor. Faint smear marks, traces of blood, led toward the stairwell. I followed the line with my eyes. "He might have been dragged," I said, squatting. But the smeared pattern suggested he had staggered here, perhaps seeking an exit. We climbed the stairs quietly. The rungs sighed under our weight. On the landing between first and second floors, I saw scratch marks along the banister. Jagged gouges where someone had gripped and slipped. They were fresh. My pulse quickened. I shone my light downward. At the base, more dried blood. Green placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sir, maybe you should step back." His tone was firm, but not unkind. I straightened. "He was here," I said. He looked at me like I was his only chance. My voice was raw. I swallowed. Then he disappeared. We reached the second floor. The hallway was narrower, the paint darker, the smell denser. I passed apartments I'd already canvassed. Nothing but emptiness. Then, at 2B, the door was slightly ajar. My chest seized. I raised my flashlight and drew my service weapon, just in case. I eased the door wider. The unit was empty, but the sink was running, water spilling over the edge and down the drain. A blood trail glistened in the water's confusion. I knelt beside the sink, examining footprints in the puddle. Barefoot, smeared red. Whoever washed here had rinsed their feet, their hands, anything they could. The mask fragment might have been torn off in a struggle here, too. I leaned closer, heart pounding. In the mirror, a message scratched in the condensation. He's watching. The letters were faint but clear. My breath caught. Jesus Christ, Green muttered behind me. That message meant someone had time, opportunity, and intent. Someone had cleaned up partially, then left a taunt. And he was still here, somewhere. I radioed dispatch, voice low. 47, Green. We've got possible fresh prints in 2B, looks like cleanup. Also, message in mirror. He's watching. Please inform forensics. Dispatch came back. Copy that. Forensics en route. ETA 45 minutes. I rose, stomach churning. He's here, I told Green. Somewhere in this building. My flashlight beam swung across doors. They all stared back. No sign of life, no screams. Just the sick realization that we were inside a predator's lair. Let's clear floor by floor, Green said. We'll find him. We moved down the hall, methodically knocking and announcing. Silence. At 1A, we found the stuck hallway door from earlier. It was open now, door jam splintered. I pressed my back against the wall. This is it, I whispered. I shone my light inside. The room was dark, save for a faint glow under the doorway to the bathroom. We advanced. The air was humid. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Inside the bathroom, the light came from a cell phone screen. Face up on the counter, video playing on loop. Static, then a pair of terrified eyes, mask stretched tight, blood dripping. It flickered and jumped. I recognized the eyes instantly. My blood ran cold. Before I could react, I heard a click behind me. Footsteps, soft, deliberate. I spun, gun raised. The hallway was empty, but a figure half-step behind me solidified. Tall, lanky, no mask now, features obscured in shadow. In his hand, he held a twisted bit of wire, an impromptu garrote. I froze. He raised the wire to his lips, then sighed and placed it across his collarbone, slicing. A thin ribbon of blood welled. He looked at me and Green, expression empty but eyes fierce. Then he whispered, voice eerily calm. They never opened the door. He pressed the wire harder. Green cursed and dove forward. I fired my taser. Barbs struck him in the chest. He convulsed, eyes rolling back before dimming. The wire fell to the floor, clattering. Green cuffed him as I radioed urgently, "Suspect down. Get EMS now, and hurry." He slumped against me, limp, blood spilling around his throat. I knelt, pressing on the wound. Chaos burst into the hallway. Shouts, footsteps, bright lights. As forensics and medical techs swarmed in, I stood, hands trembling. The man on the floor was both victim and perpetrator. He'd hunted for care, then hunted us. And in the end, he broke himself. They lifted him out, chains rattling. A neighbor peeked from behind a peephole. Half the building watched in silence. I caught that look, fear mixed with something else. Guilt? Empathy? I walked back to the stairwell, blood still warm under my glove. Every step echoed. I glanced back. The hallway was empty again. My radio barked for me to report in. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, heart pounding. I answered, voice steady. "This is 47, scene secured. One male, approximately 30s, self-harm and attempted assault. Charges pending, perimeter clear." I killed the radio. Alone, once more, in the echoing lobby. The mist drifted past the windows, swirling. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and exhaled. Sleep would not come tonight. Not after this. Not with the image of his tearing himself apart, whispering, "They never opened the door." I rubbed my eyes and straightened, mind racing. The building was silent, empty, except for the darkness. And I knew he wasn't the only one. Nights like this breed more masks, more mistakes, more people at their breaking point. I switched off the lobby lights and stepped into the night, rain beginning to fall. My cruiser sat waiting, headlights off. I climbed in, closed the door, and sat in the quiet. The storm rolled in, thunder muttering in the distance. I thought about the neighbors, the calls, the doors that slammed shut. And I wondered, who else would call, only to find no one listening? Because tonight was just one story. And out there, in the darkness beyond Elm Street, countless more waited in silence. The dawn light slanted through the station windows as I stepped into the briefing room, exhaustion weighing on every muscle. Detective Alvarez was already there, eyes red-rimmed, flipping through pages of witness statements. Green sat to my right, silent, but his posture, leaning forward, hands clasped, spoke volumes. I dropped into a seat and pressed my palms into my eyes. The room smelled of stale coffee and vinyl chairs. Alvarez cleared his throat. "We've got the forensics report," he said, handing me a stapled packet. Mask fragment had fibers matching a costume sold at Party Depot 2 blocks from Elm. Blood spatter patterns indicate the suspect staggered through 3 units before attempting self-harm in one eye flipped to the diagram. Arrows marking the smear trail, notes in red ink. Beneath it all, a small scrawl. No forced entry to any unit. I caught my breath. "He walked freely," I murmured. The implications churned my stomach. Someone with planning. Someone who knew the building. Someone who could move unnoticed. Green spoke up. Our guy, our injured man, he wasn't from Eastville. No DMV records, no local ties. His eyes locked on mine. That means someone here arranged for him to come. A heavy silence settled. Alvarez leaned back. "We need to identify who disabled the cameras and guided him inside." He tapped the folder. "I've assigned tech to analyze cell tower pings. We'll see if his phone was there before 2345, or if someone called him." I nodded, though my mind drifted. I thought of the neighbors, their terror, their closed doors. I thought of that single message in 2B. "He's watching." Whoever wrote it knew my name, my call sign, or at least knew exactly how to manipulate me. Later, I found myself back on Elm Street, this time in plain clothes, notebook in hand. The building loomed, silent as a tomb. Fog drifted at my feet, tendrils caressing the stoop. I stepped onto the cracked concrete, each footfall loud in my own head. I ran through the timeline again. Mask first spotted at 2345, disturbance call at 2347, cameras disabled by 2346, so someone had to be inside before any of us arrived. I pressed my ear to the door. Inside, the stale air still hung heavy with bleach and old blood. I pictured that corridor, gallery of closed doors, and felt the same pit of dread. I made a note. Canvass every tenant again, but this time focus on visitors before midnight. I needed patterns. Walking away, I passed the strip mall where Party Depot sat. Its windows were dark now, but tacky decorations still clung to the glass. Fake cobwebs, plastic spiders. I imagined the suspect buying the mask here, slipping it into a bag, then disappearing into the night. I placed my hand on the cold window and peered inside. Shelves stood empty and dusty. A small, abandoned desk sat at the back, glitter spilling across the floor. My phone buzzed. A text from Alvarez with a photo attachment. An image from CCTV outside the depot at 22:30. A man, slender, hooded, mask in pocket, stepping under the flicker of a street lamp. His face was turned away, but posture and gait matched the detective's sketches. I thumbed the photo side to side, jaw clenched. I traced his path on my phone's map. Depot to Elm Street, 2 miles on foot. But there was a shortcut. A service alley behind the apartments, unlit, common knowledge among residents. I made my way back to the rear entrance. Tall dumpsters lined the alley, crawling with graffiti. I snapped photos for the report. Skid marks where the suspect might have dropped something, scuffs on the loading dock. At the back door, fresh footprints marred the gravel. Prints in rain-softened mud, leading inside. I bagged the spot with bright yellow tape and called in Green and Forensics. We pried the door open, hinges rusted but intact. Inside, the stench was sharper. Ammonia, mildew, something coppery faint beneath it. I texted Alvarez. Potential entry point, suspect used corridor no one else mentions. Later that evening, I sat at home, barely noticing the ticking clock on my kitchen wall. My uniform hung on the back of a chair, still wrinkled from nights of use. I stared at a blank sheet on my desk where I'd started to draft my statement. Every detail felt too clinical, too detached from the nightmare I'd lived. I crumpled the paper and tossed it into a wastebasket. Sleep was elusive, but I drifted off briefly to a dream of corridors and closed doors. In the dream, I pounded on them, calling out, "It's me, open up." No one answered. Then I woke to my phone buzzing. A new lab result. The mask fibers contained trace fibers of mustard seed oil, an old recipe for making latex smell more authentic. That suggested the suspect had planned this for weeks, maybe months. My stomach sank. Whoever orchestrated this wanted a horror show, and they got one. But why? I realized the predator was not the man in the mask. He was the puppet. The true puppeteer watched from afar, feeding scenes to hungry neighbors, watching us scramble. Cut to 2 days later, we finally had a break. A neighbor in 3B, late-night nurse on third shift, remembers a quiet knock around 22:15, 2 nights before. She peeked through the peephole, saw a woman's face, frantic, whispering into a phone. Just let him in. She didn't. But she jotted down the number on her phone. A burner, later traced to a payphone at the old gas station on Route 14. Alvarez and I drove out there at dawn. The station was abandoned, gas pumps rusted, weeds cracking through the pavement. I felt the weight of the case press on me like the humid air. We searched the payphone booth. On the ground lay a crumpled scrap of paper, numbers scrawled in pencil. Phone numbers, apartment units, times. Then I saw it. A time slot at 23:30, Elm Street, script for what would unfold. I ran my finger over the numbers. They matched every detail. Calls placed to each unit just minutes apart, designed to lure us and the neighbors into the same trap. A twisted choreography of terror. I looked at Alvarez. He shook his head. "They wanted us to see the monster," he said, voice low. "They wanted us to rush in." The scale of it left me cold. Someone had sat at a desk, mapping out every step. Phone calls, camera takedowns, smear trails, self-harm scene. And then they'd watched it play out like a live broadcast. That night, we staged a sting. Uniforms at 23:15. Neighbors briefed, calls monitored. At 23:30, the first call came through. Quiet, distorted voice begging for help. I pressed accept on the console and let it ring through to the neighbor. A second later, I knocked on the door myself. It cracked open. No mask. A man on the floor, face pale, clutching his phone. "Help me," he whispered. I cuffed him gently. In the interrogation room, under harsh white light, he sat shaking. He wore a security uniform, logo from the gas station on Route 14. His eyes were vacant, haunted. I watched him dig in his pocket and pull out a script, lines typed on printer paper. He's watching. They never opened. Help me first. He smiled a thin, broken smile. I leaned forward. "You wrote these?" I asked. He nodded. "You set the whole thing up?" He blinked, as if waking from a deep dream. "I wanted to see how far you'd go." I closed my eyes, listening to my own breath. "Why?" I managed. He shrugged. "Because I wondered, would anyone open the door?" He tapped the paper. "Would anyone answer the call?" Silence stretched. Then he looked right at me. "Would you?" He didn't wait for my answer. He sat back, eyes distant. The question hung between us, heavier than the night air. In the weeks that followed, charges were filed, cameras reinstalled, neighbor watch programs formed. But the question never left me. On every late-night patrol, when I pass 8 Elm Street, I catch myself listening, waiting for a knock. I wonder, if I call out, "It's me, open up," would someone answer? Or would they slam the door, convinced the monster stands waiting? I don't know. And that's the last thing I tell dispatch before my shift ends. Unit 47 clear. Eastville, be careful whose call you answer tonight. I returned to Elm Street that evening just as the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky a bruised purple. At 19:02 on November 5th, I eased my unmarked cruiser into the lot behind the apartment building, engine humming gently in the quiet. Detective Alvarez and Trooper Green were already there, leaning against their vehicles under the pale glow of the parking lot lamp. I climbed out and felt the chill settle into my bones. The building loomed, its windows dark, and eyes on me. Alvarez met me at the rear entrance, folder in hand. "We've got the neighbor statements compiled," he said, voice low. He handed me pages of transcribed interviews. Ms. Delgado on the first floor, her cat yowling at midnight as the masked figure shuffled past her door. Mr. Thompson in 2C, who woke at 2340 to hear distant clicks and soft footsteps, and Ms. Nyan in 4A, who thought the pounding on her door was raccoons until dead silence fell. Each account added a piece to the puzzle, but none could identify a face. I traced my pen down the timeline. 22:25, suspect purchases mask at Party Depot. 22:45, appears at rear entrance. 22:53, knocks on 3B. 2300, call to 2A. 23:15, message scratched in 2B. 23:30, final call to 1A, followed by his self-harm attempt. As I ran my finger along the events, I felt a knot in my gut tighten. Someone had orchestrated each step, every ring, every pause, every scream. We moved through the lobby, careful not to disturb any evidence. I recognized the faint smear of congealed blood by the stairwell. Green crouched and bagged a scuff of dried residue, while Alvarez examined a red smear on the handrail. I took photographs. Each image captured a moment of desperation, frozen in time. The building seemed to exhale under our lights. On the second floor, forensic had dusted for prints in 2B. The lab report indicated partial palm smudges, too blurred to match our victim, too indistinct to match any resident. But on the doorframe of 3C, by the handle, they found a clear print. Slender fingers, long middle joint ridges. Someone practiced at leaving misleading traces. I filed the description away. whoever planned this knew how to wipe away the real and leave behind a deliberate false trail. By 2110, the only thing missing was the suspect himself. He was still recovering in St. Mary's ICU, stable but sedated. We had a warrant to question him as soon as he regained consciousness. Meanwhile, neighbors whispered in the hallways, their faces drawn with anxiety. I stopped by Miss Patel's door on the 3rd floor. She peeked from behind the peephole, clutching her robe. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Do you think he'll come back?" she whispered. I knelt to meet her gaze. "We've secured the building," I said. "No one gets in or out without us knowing." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. At 22:05, we reconvened in the squad room, lights harsh overhead. Alvarez spread out maps of the building and surrounding blocks. "I've flagged all local surveillance, parking lot cameras, convenience store feeds, anything between Party Depot and Elm Street between 2200 and 2300 hours. He tapped a point on the map. "We have a gap here. 2 city blocks with no footage." My pulse quickened. That dark patch covered the loading dock and an alleyway that ran behind the recycling center. Whoever guided the suspect likely used that route. Green leaned forward. I talked to the recycling center manager. They had the doors locked early, but the loading bay gate is electric. He said the keypad was acting erratically that night. Lights flickered. He paused. "Could have been tampered with." I nodded. "So, our puppeteer had access to the hatch code, or hotwired the system." I ran my hand through my hair. The building's old wiring, the disabled cameras, the dead cell signal at 2340, it all pointed to someone with both technical skill and intimate knowledge of the site. By midnight, I was back at my desk at the precinct, eyes stinging. The case file lay open, maps, photos, witness statements, forensic prints. I laid a hand on the half-blank interrogation form for our unconscious suspect. Would he talk when he woke, or simply repeat the chilling line in the mirror? "He's watching?" I stared at the blank lines, felt their accusatory gaze. Then I noticed a small detail in the lab's report. Trace fibers of an industrial rubber adhesive on the mask fragment, used by factory workers. Party Depot sold only basic molds. This adhesive suggested someone modified the mask, strengthened the interior to prevent tearing. I logged the adhesive type into my notes and checked cross-references. A local glove factory 2 miles away used that compound. I called a tip line. "Detective Bradley. I need a canvas of anyone working at Rook Rubber Industries between October 1st and November 3rd. They confirmed 8 employees, 2 temp workers, 1 on night shift. One name jumped out. Marcus Lyle, temp, hired by a subcontractor, no background check beyond basic. Address on file, a rooming house 2 blocks from Elm Street. I grabbed my jacket. At 1:15, I drove to the boarding house, a quiet, narrow street of identical porches. The house had peeling white paint, a single porch light. I rang the bell, no response. I pressed my badge into the glass, called out. Silence. The back door was slightly ajar. I drew my weapon and entered, checking each step. The hallway smelled of damp paper and stale coffee. Doors lined both sides, most were ajar. I moved to the room at the end, Lyle's, according to the leasing agreement. The door swung open on hinges that squealed. Inside, I found a desk littered with scraps of paper, codes, times, apartment numbers, some scribbled in Marcus's handwriting. I bagged the entire pad. On the floor lay a discarded latex glove, stiff with dust. I photographed shoe prints next to it, matching the smudged print from 3C. I exhaled. We'd cornered the mastermind. The next morning, we woke Lyle in interrogation. His eyes were glassy, body still groggy. Detective Alvarez watched silently as I read him his rights. I slid the pad across the table. His shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt," he mumbled. "I wanted to see if someone would answer if they thought I was dying." I pressed a finger to the paper. "You scripted calls, sabotaged electronics, guided a wounded man through 6 units. Why?" His eyes blinked up, haunted. I thought if they saw enough horror, they'd finally look out the door." Silence. I leaned back. "And did they?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "They didn't even open it." He stared at his blood-stained hands. "Not one door." The weight of his answer hit me like a blow. Outside, dawn was breaking, pale light washing over Elm Street. I knew the final act was close, just one more chapter before this nightmare ended. But in that moment, as his confession echoed between us, I realized the story wasn't about masks or cameras. It was about isolation, despair, the fear that seals shut every entry. And I wondered, how many more doors would stay closed when the next call came? I rolled past the worn "Welcome to Pine Ridge" sign at 2:07 a.m., the cruiser's headlights cutting through a low blanket of fog that curled along the asphalt like a living thing. The air was sharp with the bite of early November, and my uniform, crisp and still smelling of the station, felt suddenly heavy against my skin. "I'm Officer Emily Dawson, badge number 42-17, on my third 12-hour graveyard shift in a row, and trust me when I say I was beginning to wonder if the radio static was more entertaining than the actual calls. The silence of this town after midnight is something you learn to dread. No late-night diners, no foot traffic, just the occasional tumbleweed skittering across empty lots and the hoot of an owl perched on a gnarled oak. I tuned the AM station low, letting the distant twang of country music fill the cab while I scanned the horizon for movement. My coffee, lukewarm by now, sat in the cup holder, and I idly wondered if I'd ever taste real sleep again. Then the call came in. Dispatcher Miller's voice crackled over the scanner at 2:15 exactly. "Unit 4-2. We've got a possible break-in in progress at 1147 Willow Creek Road." Caller reports someone inside. Sounds panicked. Panicked. 2 simple syllables that shot a bolt of adrenaline straight through my spine. I slammed the cruiser into drive and flicked on the strobes. No siren, not in these parts. You keep that silent to avoid spooking any innocent late-night wanderers. The fog thickened as I turned onto Willow Creek Road. No streetlights, no pavement markings, just 2 rutted tracks winding between fields of scrub and abandoned barns that looked like skeletons picked clean. GPS said 2 miles. The radio signal said nothing. My pulse quickened. I slowed where the map told me the address should be. Headlights picked out a lone oak stump on the left, its bark blackened by years of sun and storms. Beyond that, nothing but darkness. No faded mailbox, no gravel driveway, not even tire tracks. My chest tightened. I keyed the mic. "Dispatch, can you confirm that address? I'm getting nothing but empty field here." Static. Then Miller, voice distant. "Confirmed. 1147 Willow Creek. Backlot, abandoned for years, but records still list an occupant. Caller's number, same address. Can you ping it?" My phone, resting on the dash, showed 1 bar, barely enough. I tapped call, straight to voicemail. "No signal, returning to station," I told Miller, but I didn't move. Because something in that caller's voice, unsure, breathless, like he knew there was no real help coming, felt wrong to ignore. I popped the cruiser door open. Damp air rushed in, carrying the faint rustle of dead leaves. My boots sank into soft earth as I followed what I hoped was a hidden path toward civilization. porch light. If there was a house, there had to be light. Step by step, I pushed through overgrown grass until my beam caught a dim glow ahead. The farmhouse looked older than time, peeling white paint, a sagging roof half hidden by creeping vines, windows dark as a tunnel's mouth. Only the porch lamp, a single bulb swinging on a frayed cord, offered any welcome. I raised my hand, knocked once. Wood groaned. A figure shuffled inside and cracked the door open. A lean man in his late 20s, blue eyes rimmed red. His name, he'd tell me later, was Rick Walters. He stared at my badge without blinking, as if he'd expected something far worse. Behind him, an empty hallway yawned. No other doors, no sounds. "You called 911?" I said, voice steady but low. My flashlight danced across the floorboards. They bore no scuff of fresh footsteps. He swallowed. "Yes, I thought someone was in my house." His voice broke on the last word. "Show me," I said, stepping inside. The door thudded closed behind me, and the porch light swung so wildly I thought it might snap the cord. My hand hovered over my holstered taser, heart hammering like a sledge. Every creak and sigh in that house felt amplified. Dust motes floated in the air, illuminated by my beam. An old armchair sat by the fireplace, untouched, a cracked mug on the mantel. Rick led me through the living room, past a doorway into a narrow hallway lined with closed doors. He paused, looking over his shoulder. "Here," he whispered. "I heard it right here." My skin crawled. I cleared my throat. "Anything else?" I asked. But the only answer was the hum of the fridge and the soft, distant clap of wind against the walls. I checked each room in turn: bedroom, bathroom, kitchen. No sign of forced entry, no hidden intruders. Just echoes and dust. As I stepped back into the hallway, I felt the hair on my neck stand up. Something didn't sit right. On the way out, I glanced at the front window. My reflection stared back. Pale, drawn, and suddenly too alone. Rick followed me onto the porch, arms crossed. "There's no other houses for miles," he said, "just me." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "You sure you're in the right place?" I nodded, but my stomach churned. "Positive." He nodded once, as if relieved I was leaving. "Thanks, officer." I watched him close the door, then slipped back into my cruiser. My breath came out in ragged white clouds as I locked the doors. Every instinct screamed to drive away screaming, to radio for backup, to call anyone. But before I could turn the key, the rearview mirror caught movement. A dark shape slumped in the back seat, too still for comfort. I froze, hand on the radio. "Dispatch." But my voice cracked. The shape shifted, head tilting just enough for 2 eyes to catch the light. Eyes not Rick's, colder, calculating. I screamed and yanked open the door, stumbling onto the porch as if burning. A roar of engines across the road made me whirl, but there was nothing. Just empty land and that single porch light swinging like a metronome. No car, no figure, no footsteps. I ran to the road, radio in hand, desperate. "Dispatch." 4-2 needs assistance now, possible intruder. Only static answered. My heart thudded so hard I thought I might collapse. The fog pressed in from every side, and the farmhouse behind me swallowed the light. Then a single gunshot rang out, from somewhere inside. I sprinted forward. I flicked off the cruiser's engine and stepped into the night air, every fiber of me on edge. The fog had thickened while I was inside. Now it clung to my jacket and curled around my boots in wisps that felt alive. I could taste damp earth and fallen leaves on my tongue, a sour tang that reminded me how far I'd wandered from the safety of the station. My breath puffed white in front of me as I crouched beside the open driver's door. radio still crackling static from my panicked backup call that had gone unanswered. I swallowed hard, chest tight, and squared my shoulders. This quiet stretch of road, bathed in starlight and silence, wasn't supposed to feel like an ambush. I smelled it first, the sharp odor of gunpowder mixed with old mildew, as though the very air inside that farmhouse had been charged. I tucked my flashlight into my left hand and drew my taser in my right, adrenaline sharpening my senses to a knife's edge. The single bulb above the porch flickered like a dying heartbeat. I eased forward, every step measured, ears straining for unheard clicks or creaks. The wind sighed through the broken gutter overhead, setting the loose boards to whisper against the doorframe. "Rick," I whispered, voice brittle, "you still in there?" Silence answered. The front door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of yellow light painting the threshold on the gravel. My reflection wavered in the window next to it. Pale face, tight jaw, dark eyes. I'd greeted one blade of unease when I'd seen that shadow in my back seat a minute ago, but staring at my own mirrored fear felt like a second blade sliding in. My hand tightened on the taser's grip. I eased the door wider and stepped inside, flashlight beam carving a path through motes of dust. The living room was unchanged from my earlier sweep. Overstuffed armchair, sagging rug, a single candle on the mantel long since snuffed. Dust lay thick on every surface, as if no one had touched a thing in weeks. Behind me, the screen door banged shut with a hollow clang that echoed like someone whispering my name. I spun around. Empty hallway. Boxed-in door frames stretched to either side and to the left. The kitchen door cracked open, the floor tiled in grimy white squares. The refrigerator hummed quietly, its light spilling out in a narrow ribbon when I nudged the door. Inside, nothing but milk bottles, long past expiration dates, and a single wilted head of lettuce. No sign of life. I stepped back, heart pounding. "Show yourself," I said aloud, knowing full well the man, or thing, I'd chased here wasn't likely to answer. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the house's yawning stillness. I took a deep breath, slowed it down, and reminded myself I was trained for this. 12 years on this force, dozens of calls just like this, except never like this. A snap, sharp and sudden, crackled from the far corner of the living room. My flashlight beam whipped toward it, landing on a framed photograph leaning against the wall. A family portrait. A younger Rick Walters, beside a woman and a toddler. Smiles frozen in time. The glass was cracked across the mother's face, spidering down to the child's leg, where the cracks pooled like dark veins. My pulse fluttered. I crept forward, every muscle coiled tight. I lifted the picture to inspect the broken glass. The back was taped haphazardly with black duct tape and scrawled in faded marker, "Do not disturb." Written like a warning, written for me. My skin prickled. I shuffled backward into the hallway, turning down the left corridor. Doors lined the walls, bedroom, closet, bathroom, each one closed. I reached the first door, jarred the handle and nudged it open. Inside, a bedroom. Mattress on the floor, no sheets, only a thin blanket folded at the foot. A dresser drawer shoved open with socks spilling out like someone had left in a hurry. No footprints in the dust. The next door was locked. I rapped on it. "Police, open up!" I used my shoulder to nudge the frame. Solid wood, unyielding. From inside, I heard a soft shuffle, fabric against floorboard, then silence. My taser hummed quietly. I thumbed the trigger guard, tension coiling. I returned to the living room, pausing in the hallway's threshold. The candle on the mantel was relit, flame flickering as if someone had struck a match. But Rick had followed me out here. He couldn't have snuck back inside. My mind raced. Who was playing this game? My radio crackled once, startling me. "Officer Dawson, respond?" I fumbled for it, voice raw. "This is Dawson. I need assistance at 1147 Willow Creek." Static swallowed my words. I pressed the button again, nothing. The urgency that had driven me here was collapsing into dread. I ducked behind the sofa, heart thundering in my ears, flashlight pointed at the hallway. Every sense screamed, "Get out, get help, get away from this place," but my training pinned me in place. Protocol: clear the house, establish perimeter, wait for backup. Even if I was alone, I would complete the mission. A door creaked open behind me. I whipped around. The bathroom door, which I hadn't checked, swung wide. Pale moonlight streamed in, painting the tiles in ghostly stripes. The wastebasket lay overturned, contents strewn, as though someone had rifled it. A soft gurgle echoed as I stepped inside. The toilet had overflowed, murky water lapping the base. I clicked my tongue. "Gross," I muttered. But the moment was broken by a sudden cold blast of air that knocked me sideways. My flashlight skittered across the floor, beam dancing wildly off the walls. I yanked it back up. The bathroom was empty. But on the mirror, written in dripping condensation, 3 letters: R-U-N. I stumbled back, heart in my throat. My badge burned against my chest, reminding me of who I was, of what I had to do. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and forced myself to breathe. No hallucinations, no tricks of the mind. This was real. Footsteps pounded overhead. Heavy boots or bare feet, I couldn't tell. The floor above groaned like a ship's hull. I retraced my steps toward the front door, praying I'd make it outside. My boot hit something solid. A hand, perhaps, or a fallen beam. I tumbled forward, catching myself against the door jamb. My shoulder jarred, pain puncturing my focus. I rolled onto my back and looked up at the ceiling, where the smoke detector hung loosely, wires splayed like exposed nerve endings. Then I heard him, Rick Walters' voice, quiet but unwavering. "Officer Dawson." His tone was calm, eerily calm. "You shouldn't have come alone." I scrambled to a crouch, pointing my flashlight and taser at the hall. "Show yourself." My voice was louder this time, stronger. My training fired back into my limbs. Sweep left, sweep right, cover corners. No one came. Just the echo of my breathing and the faint thump of my own heartbeat. I pulled the door open and aimed my light down the dark lane leading back to the road. Freedom lay 10 feet away. My finger hovered over the taser. Motion flashed behind me. A figure slipping around the corner of the dining room, slender and swift. I clenched my teeth and lunged, but the floorboards creaked treacherously. The intruder vanished. I chased the sound of footsteps and slammed into the chair in the living room, sending it skidding across the dusty floor. The candle on the mantel guttered, shadows dancing like demons. A single gunshot cracked through the house, louder than thunder, rattling my bones. I felt the pressure wave before I saw the flash, a bloom of orange inside the far doorway. My ears rang. My breath froze. I sprinted forward into the darkness, feet slipping on damp earth as the front door banged shut behind me. My flashlight lay forgotten in the dust, its beam flickering across the overgrown lawn. Every nerve screamed to get away, to reach the cruiser and blast down this godforsaken road. But then I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Too measured to be Rick Walters fleeing, too heavy for a trespasser. Fear twisted in my gut as I froze beneath the porch overhang. The porch light flickered out. Total darkness swallowed me whole, and the only sound was my ragged breathing. I forced a steady inhale, letting the cold air clear my head. Protocol flicked through my mind. Don't chase blindly. establish a perimeter, call for backup. But all that training collapsed under the weight of raw panic. I edged toward the stairs, hands outstretched, fingertips brushing damp wood. The door slammed behind me, rattling the frame so hard I felt it in my teeth. I leapt down the steps 2 at a time, palms stinging where they scraped the peeling paint. Gravel crunched under my boots as I pressed on, lunging into the tall grass that brushed my knees. The moonlight broke through thinning clouds, revealing the cruiser's red and blue strobe bars eerily pulsing in the distance. All around me, fields stretched into shadow, no sign of another soul. Then I heard it, a muffled voice behind me, low and rasping. I spun, heart hammering, and caught a glimpse of movement at the tree line, a slender silhouette gliding between oaks. I raised my voice, hoarse, "Police! Stop right there!" My words vanished against the night's roar. Clarity returned in a flash. I was deep in someone's trap. I pivoted and ran for the cruiser, dread and determination fueling each stride. Reaching the cruiser, I yanked at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The locks had clicked shut, unseen fingers turning them while I was inside. Panic surged. I banged the window with my fist until it cracked. Starburst spiderwebs radiating from the first impact. Stones cracked more glass as I pounded again, desperate to reach the safety of the seat and my radio. But every second felt like a lifetime, and that rasping voice trailed ever closer. Finally, the window yielded under my weight. Shards rained down as I tumbled into the driver's seat. I yanked open the door, hauled myself out, and dove to the far side, slamming it shut. My uniform snagged on broken glass, ripping the fabric where blood blossomed on my forearm. Ignoring the pain, I circled to the passenger side, unlatched it, and forced it open. Inside lay my flashlight, still blinking, and my taser, my only means of defense. I grabbed both and whirled back toward the barn, where a single off-yellow bulb hovered overhead. The structure had looked empty on the map, but now it loomed like a cathedral of nightmares. My boots crunched on discarded boards as I approached the wide double doors, one hanging crooked on its hinge. I pressed my ear to the wood. Inside, the barn was silent. Too silent. I keyed the mic. Dispatch Unit 4-2 requesting immediate assistance at 1147 Willow Creek Road. Unauthorized person armed and static. Again. I cursed under my breath, knowing help might never arrive in time. So I did the only thing I could. I went in. My flashlight's beam danced across hay bales stacked along the walls, casting long, crooked shadows that writhed as I passed. Old horse tack hung from nails, rusted horseshoes, frayed ropes. The air smelled of dust and manure and something else, something metallic like blood. I heard a shuffle to my left and wheeled around. Nothing. Just the fluttering of rats I imagined scuttling away. I forced my breathing steady, thumb brushing the safety on my taser. One wrong step, and all I'd have was that electric snap against flesh, hardly enough to stop a determined assailant. Yet I crept forward, every fiber of my being taut. A low moan, dreamlike, childlike, drifted down from the hayloft above. My pulse skipped. I shone the beam upward, a ladder propped against the far wall, rungs disappearing into gloom. The moan came again, closer. I put a foot on the first rung and climbed, each rung groaning under my weight. 30 feet up, the loft floor felt solid, rough planks warped by age. I stood, shining my light over a sea of bales. In the corner, a figure hunched against the wall. A child's shape swaddled in filthy blanket, whispering words I couldn't make out. My heart seized. "Hey!" I shouted, raising the taser. "Show me your hands." The figure didn't move, my light fell on a pale face streaked with tears and grime, eyes too large in the moonlight, eyes that watched me with uncanny calm. Behind the child, scrawled on the wooden beam in soot, "Thank you for coming." My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I scrambled back down the ladder, mind spinning. What the hell was going on? I burst out of the barn, flashlight beam searching the tree line. No backup, no wife or child waiting. Just me, alone in the dark, clutching a limp blanket. The child's moan carried after me, echoing over the fields. I forced myself to move toward the cruiser, toward safety, toward anything that made sense. Blood pounded in my ears, each heartbeat a drum of panic. I reached the cruiser, through the barn doors a final glare, and slid in behind the wheel. My flashlight bobbed in the passenger seat, its dying batteries barely a heartbeat away from going dark. Hands shaking, I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine stuttered, caught, and roared to life. Headlights carved twin beams into the night. Then I saw, reflected in the passenger window, that pale little face, pressed against the glass, eyes brimming with hollow gratitude. I jolted the car into gear and flooring the accelerator, tires shredding gravel. The farmhouse, the barn, the oak stump, it all vanished in my side mirror as I sped away. The cruiser's lights leaving twin streaks of red and blue across the land. My radio crackled once more, distant, almost mocking, before cutting out again. I swallowed bile, pressing one hand to the back of my head where a tender bump throbbed. In the drive back to town, I replayed every moment, every decision. But the image that seared into my mind was those eyes, so imploring, so devoid of fear, as if the child wanted me there, wanted to be found. The dash clock flipped to 3:42 a.m. as I pulled into the lot behind the station. My partner, Officer Ruiz, leaned against the cruiser, coffee in hand, brows knit as I climbed out. Before he could ask, I held up a shaking hand. No words would capture it. Later, I learned the farmhouse and barn had been demolished years ago, no records of a child ever living there. The oak stump was long gone, replaced by a pipeline project. But I know what I saw. I heard that whisper, and I saw those eyes in the dark, and I can't shake the feeling that they're still out there, waiting for the next patrol to roll past, hungry for someone to believe. I pulled the cruiser into the station parking lot just as the eastern sky began to pale, the first trace of dawn staining the horizon a sickly gray. My hands trembled on the wheel long after the engine cut, every muscle taut with exhaustion and fear. Officer Ruiz had climbed out of his car behind me, coffee cup dangling from one finger as he jogged toward my door. I yanked it open and stumbled out, adrenaline still coursing through my veins like wildfire. "Emily, you okay?" he asked, voice low, concerned. I could only shake my head, unable to meet his eyes. The memory of those hollow eyes pressed against the passenger window, the child's wordless "thank you" whispered on the wind, stuck in my throat like broken glass. I felt raw, exposed. Inside dispatch, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I let Ruiz guide me away from the curious stares of the other officers and the dispatcher tapping away at her console. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly as we settled into a back room crammed with file cabinets and stale coffee. I closed the door, sealing out the rest of the world. My voice came in ragged shards. "I went in to clear the house," I began, "but the house doesn't exist. At least, not on any map or record except the one they gave me. And in the barn, there was a child. A little girl or boy I don't even know. Wrapped in a blanket, crying. And when I climbed down, the barn doors slammed behind me." My breath hitched. I got to the cruiser, and then I saw them again. I forced out the words. Those eyes. Ruiz rubbed his jaw. You sure it wasn't exposure? You've been on the road for 12 hours. He closed his eyes, picturing me hunched over the wheel, fog swirling through the broken window panes. I felt anger flare through me. This was real. I heard the moan. I saw the writing on the mirror, run. And when I tried to call for backup, the radio died. He ran a hand through his hair. Let's get you checked by medical, then we file the report, we'll figure it out. But I knew filing a report meant paper trails and official versions. No suspect found, officer cleared residence, no missing person reports. That would bury the truth under layers of bureaucracy. And if I insisted, people would question my judgment, my fitness for duty. I stood abruptly. Ruiz, I'm heading home. My legs felt too heavy to stay. I need rest. Night shift's over, but he started, then sighed. Okay, just call me if anything else happens. He handed me his phone number scrawled on a post-it. No secrets. I offered a weak nod and walked past the line of patrol cars to my own. As I climbed in, the station lights flickered behind me, and for a moment I saw the silhouette of that farmhouse's porch lamp swinging in the darkness. I shook my head, trying to dispel it, then drove off the lot with tires crunching gravel. At home, my apartment felt hollow. The morning sun filtered through blinds, slicing the living room into bars of light and shadow. I dropped my gear by the door, uniform still damp from the night's mist, and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed. A text from dispatch. You up? Breakfast? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. I typed and deleted. Not hungry. Then set it face down. The hours passed in a blur of half-remembered dreams. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that child. Pale lips, wide eyes, grateful smile. I woke thrice, cold sweat soaking my sheets. Convinced, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. When evening came, I did what I always did, returned to the station for my next shift. I told myself I needed answers. Maybe some record had been misfiled. Maybe Willow Creek Road had been renamed, the farmhouse just hidden under a new address. Anything to ground me in reality. Ruiz met me at roll call. His eyes were bloodshot, but determined. I ran your call history, he said quietly as we gathered around the squad room table. No anomaly on the CAD. Dispatch says they never pinged an address beyond the usual abandoned lot record. But the phone number doesn't register in any database. I exhaled, relief and dread all at once. So it was real, I whispered. He nodded. I drove out there this afternoon in plain clothes, same oak stump, same empty field, no house, no barn, no signs of recent activity. He tapped his thigh. But I did find these. He produced a scrap of black duct tape from his pocket, the edge torn, ragged. 2 words scrawled in thick marker. Help me. My heart thundered. Where did you find it? Under a clump of grass by the east fence line, he said. 6 yards from where the gravel shoulder meets the grass. Freshly placed, smudged ink. He handed me the tape. It felt sticky in my fingers. You didn't see anything like this? I shook my head. Nothing except that mirror message. Ruiz leaned in. Whatever's happening, someone wants to be found, or someone, or something, wants you to think they're being found. We sat in silence, the distant hum of radio chatter bleeding through the walls. Around us, officers prepared for another night of patrols, the ordinary routine of law enforcement, crashes, bar fights, welfare checks. And here we were, chasing shadows. At 2:07 a.m., exactly 1 week after the initial call, I turned onto Willow Creek Road again. The station cruiser's engine idled like a tether holding me to this world. I carried a body camera and full tactical gear this time, baton, pepper spray, even a small pistol loaded with hollow points. Unusual for a routine check, but a far cry from the taser I'd carried before. Ruiz rolled up behind me, headlights off. We waved each other forward. The oak stump loomed in the fog-lit night, sentinel of the unknown. I killed the engine and stepped out, the air smelling of earth and dread. This time, I brought a strobe light, one flash every 3 seconds, painting the field in stark white. We swept the area, grid-style, marking holes in the dew-soaked ground. My boots left prints next to his. Only one unique clue, near the stump, half buried in mud, a single baby shoe, tiny, leather, scuffed. No sock, no sign of where it had come from. I picked it up with gloved hands. My breath caught. "That's too small," I said. Ruiz crouched beside me, flashlight beam tight across the sole. Size 2 toddler at most, but no missing person reports in Pine Ridge for any child in 2 years. He closed his eyes. It's like she, or he, never existed. Something moved in the fog, quick, low. We leveled our flashlights and crossed beams on a distant tree line. A small figure stood there, mere yards away, head bowed. The child's shape, unmistakable. I felt the pulse in my throat, irrational hope mingling with fear. "Hey," I called softly, heart thunderous. "It's okay, we're here to help." Each word echoed off the branches. The figure stirred, looked up, that face, eyes like empty windows, mouth curved in a silent plea. My foot slipped on the wet grass and I tumbled forward. Ruiz lunged, but it was too late. The figure vanished into the mist, leaving only a whisper. "Thank you." I scrambled to my feet, shoe in hand, breath visible on the frigid air. The forest pressed back, silent and watchful. I turned to Ruiz, voice cracking. "They're real." He stood, flashlight trembling. "Yeah, and so are we. But what do you do with something that shouldn't exist?" A single beam of moonlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the oak stump and the muddy shoe at its base. I knelt, placing the shoe beside the stump like an offering. The ground seemed to swallow it, as though taking it home. I rose slowly, each breath clouding before me. I slipped my body cam from my vest and placed it on the stump, lens facing outward. A record of this night, evidence of the impossible. "Let's leave it running," I said, voice low. Ruiz hesitated, then nodded. For answers, or at least for proof. We backed away together, retreating into the cruiser as the strobe light continued its steady pulse. Behind us, the oak stump and the little shoe lay in stark silhouette, waiting like a promise or a warning. I shut the door, locked it, and watched through the window as the camera blinked red. Recording. As we drove off, the field receded into fog, and the first birds began their morning calls. The radio crackled to life, routine chatter about shopliftings and parking complaints. But in my headset, I heard only the low, childlike whisper carried on the cold wind. "Emily, help me." Later that afternoon, I found myself alone in the evidence room, the only light coming from the dull glow of a laptop screen and the harsh LED panel overhead. The body cam was mounted on a makeshift stand, lens aimed precisely at the oak stump, recording in 30-second bursts before automatically looping. I logged in, fingers trembling, and opened the file marked 4-2 Willow Creek. Every hair on my neck stood at attention as the first frame came into view. The camera's strobe light painted the field in harsh white pulses. For a moment nothing moved, just the silhouette of the stump and the empty mud where the toddler's shoe had rested. Then, at 11 seconds in, a small figure appeared beyond the haze, standing 3 yards from the camera. I paused the footage. The shape was unmistakable. A little girl in a tattered dress, arms hanging at her sides. Fog curled around her ankles, her head tilted as if listening. My heart thudded so loud I was surprised the laptop didn't pick it up. I replayed the clip, once, twice, leaning forward until I could see her pale face, cheeks sunken, lips cracked into a thin smile. Then I unpaused. The girl took a single step toward the lens. Her eyes, dark hollows, met the camera's, and she raised a tiny hand in a gesture that felt like greeting or warning. I scrubbed forward. Static. Then at 0:24, I heard it clearly on the mic. A child's breath, ragged, as if she'd been sobbing and then held her breath. Then a whisper, "Come back." My skin crawled. I told myself it was an echo, a glitch. I clicked ahead and caught movement inside the cruiser. The lens, meant only to film the field, had swung inward, panning across the passenger window as if someone lifted it by hand. There, pressed to the glass, were two small eyes reflecting the strobe's glare. A hand, tiny, motionless, covered the window's fogged edge. I paused again, turned up the volume. The whisper came through one more time, sharper. "Emily, help me." I sat back, breath gone. The room felt impossibly small. The scrubbed linoleum floor, the metal cabinets, the stack of unfiled reports. They all seemed to press in around me, as if the walls themselves were leaning closer. I hit rewind and watched the clip in slow motion. The figure flickered, momentarily transparent, like smoke or leftover afterimage. My rational mind screamed that this was an artifact of the strobe. My gut told me it was something else, something that had been waiting for someone to believe. I scrolled through the rest of the file. No more movement. Then, just before the final loop, the camera flashed one last burst on a shape emerging from the shadow of the barn's open doors. A man, lean and still, stepped into frame. But the silhouette didn't belong to Rick Walters. The man's shoulders were too wide, stance too rigid. And when the strobe lit his face, I glimpsed hollow eyes that mirrored the child's. I slammed the laptop shut. The snap of metal lid echoed like a gunshot. My chest heaved. I didn't want to believe what I'd seen, but the evidence glared back at me. Later, I mailed the body cam to the state evidence locker and filed my report. "No trespasser located," I wrote. "Suspected hoax or technical glitch." The official summary buried every detail, all except a note to archive the footage under unexplained. When I handed the report to Sergeant Liu, he looked me in the eye and said only, "You did your job." At home that night, sleep was another battlefield. I awoke at 3:33 a.m., drenched in sweat, convinced I heard a soft knock on my front door. I reached for my phone, but there were no messages, no missed calls, nothing. Now, weeks later, I still drive past Willow Creek Road on every third shift. I haven't returned alone, but sometimes I tip the strobe on the cruiser's roof and kill the engine. I watch the fields tremble in intermittent light, and for a heartbeat, just one, I swear I see a small figure standing where the oak stump used to be, hand raised in greeting. I never stop the car. I never turn off the engine, because I'm not sure who's watching from the darkness or what they'll do if I stop believing. And right now, I need to know if you do.